Test 1, 2, 3. Meeting to order. Oh boy. I turned that one around. It's the audit
recording in progress.
where it's the the LACERA, I'm good, Audit Compliance Risk and Ethics Committee meeting that's being done virtually. So I'm starting the meeting. Welcome everybody. To start with, I'm going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would love for Trustee Me to do that for us.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair Martin. I don't have a flag here, but I'm glad to start it.
Okay,
Let's
thank you.
Everyone stand up, put your right hand on your chest, and start it. I
pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next on the agenda, and I might need some help here, is the election of officers. I don't know if Richard Bendel wants to help me with that one.
First, we'll need to do a roll call.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. This meeting is being conducted as an emergency teleconference meeting due to the governor's proclamation of the state of emergency. This meeting is being held virtually and in person, so it will do a roll call of all the trustees to confirm attendance. Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Martinez? Ms. Me?
Aye.
Ms. Durazo?
Present.
Mr. Green?
Present.
Mr. Moore?
I'm here.
Okay. Trustee Ginsburg will be absent from today's meeting. Staff participating in the meeting include Deputy CEO Louis Lugo, Assistant Executive Officers JJ Popowich and Laura Guglielmo, CIO John Grable, Chief Audit Executive Richard Bendel, Chief Counsel Steve Rice, Senior Staff Counsel Allison Barrett, Director of Human Resources Dr. Carly Natoya. Internal audit staff include Leisha Collins, Christina Logan, Nathan Amick, Gabriel Tafoya, Christina Sun, Christian Velasco, Delfino Aguilar, and all division managers. Consultants, Kristen Hunt and Amanda Cronk from Plant Moran, Brent Bannister from Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting, and Audit Compliance Risk and Ethics Committee Consultant, Larry Jensen. Trustees, please use the raise your hand Zoom option to be placed in the queue. At this time, we ask all meeting participants to mute their mics until you are ready to speak. And now Mr. Rice will make a statement regarding the emergency meeting.
Thank you. Under Government Code Section 54953E, the committee may permit teleconference meetings when there is a proclaimed state of emergency and the committee finds that as a result of the emergency, meeting in person would create imminent risk to the health and safety of attendees. The committee today may properly make the required findings because of the governor's proclamations of a state of emergency, which remain in effect based on the Los Angeles County fires, LACERA's proximity to the Eaton fire zone, and today's rains. We will need a motion and second to invoke an emergency teleconference for today's meeting, and the motion should include the finding of imminent risk if the meeting were held in person.
So moved.
I second.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Green.
Trustee Green.
And second, sorry.
Trustee Durazo.
Durazo, okay. Ms. Martin?
I'm ready now. A
It would
vote.
be a vote.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Ms. Me? Okay, she's muted. I believe she said yes.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Durazo?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
And Mr. Moore?
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
So with that, we can proceed. Thank you.
We could go ahead and start, Ms. Martin, with the elections.
Okay.
So is it the secretary that was, who was the secretary last year? Did they handle the election?
Ms. Martin is going to go ahead and do the,
I'm going to do the election. Is
yes,
that what I'm going to do?
yes.
Okay. Tell me which way I start.
Nominations for the chair. Ask request for nomination for the chair position.
Okay, so, anybody have nominations for the chair position?
I would like to nominate Mr. Wayne Moore.
That's going to be problematic for me.
Is it possible to nominate Trustee Martin again? Or she cannot do it
Yes, no, you may nominate Trustee Martin again, yes.
Sorry, Wayne.
I nominate Trustee Martin to continue.
Any other nominations? Okay, so then that means Trustee Martin is the new chair for 2025. Thank you. Please jump in.
Congratulations.
So nominations now for the vice chair.
Okay, so I'm opening up nominations for the vice chair. I would like to nominate Trustee Me. Any other nominations? Okay, Trustee Me is the vice chair for the acres for 2025.
And lastly, the secretary position.
Okay, any nominations for secretary?
I would like to nominate Ms. Martinez.
Is she on our?
She in meeting? Yeah, I don't see her here.
She's joining.
Well, good. Let's get the vote out before she gets on. Just tell her when she gets on.
All right. No other nomination?
I would like to nominate Trustee Lanton. I believe I saw her just join, but
She's not on the committee.
that's right. Oh, forgot about that.
Okay, so no other nominees? Okay, so Trustee Martinez is the secretary for acres for 2025. As long as she's okay with it. Anything else after that, Richard, that I need?
I believe that's the committee.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm gonna continue to roll here. We have the approval of the minutes for December 12th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Moore and made the motion. Mr. Green, second.
Correct.
I'll do a roll call. Ms. Martin,
Aye.
Ms. Martinez, Ms. Me,
Aye.
Ms. Durazo,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Moore.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So now we're moving to non-consent items, and we're going to start with Christina Logan. And it's our proposed 2025 Acre Committee meeting dates.
Pardon me, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Thank you.
Is Christine available? Oh, there she goes.
Miss Martin, Miss Martinez has joined. Her Zoom link was not working, so she's in the meeting now.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Trustee Martinez.
Good morning.
I want to let you know that you've been voted in as the secretary of this committee. I've been voted in as the chair, and okay, who's the vice chair again?
Miss Me.
It's me? That's right. And then if you're okay with it, you are the secretary.
I don't think I have a choice. Yes, I'm fine.
Trustee Green wanted it that way. He says, hurry up and vote. Thank you.
Okay, whatever the boss says.
Okay. All right, Ms. Logan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Good morning, Acre Committee trustees. We have a recommendation for the proposed 2025 Audit Acre Committee meeting dates. It's April 24th, June 26th, August 21st, and November 20th. They are all on Thursdays. We anticipate them beginning at 9 o'clock in the morning. We looked over the board training schedules to come to these dates. So we would like to see if these dates work for the committee, and if so, we're asking that you approve these dates.
Ms. Logan, can you read the dates back to us again?
Sure. April 24th, June 26th, August 21st, November 20th.
I know it's difficult
Just-
to, oh, go ahead.
Just want to let you know, there is a JOCC meeting on April 23rd as well. It's going to be a back-to-back meeting. It's a quorum, just so we don't have any quorum issues.
Hey, anybody have any comments?
That seems to work for me, and we're gonna get the calendar invites, right, Linda?
Yes, you'll be sending those out.
Okay, thank you.
I will not be here on June the 26th. I'll be gone the whole month.
Any other comments?
I just have a question, Madam Chair, if, to Linda, if the JOGC, is there an issue with having it back to back, or is it going to be, that's something we should consider pivoting to a different time?
There's not going to be an issue. It's just making sure trustees are available both days, because sometimes it's hard to get people back to back-to-back meetings due to work schedules.
It be making sense to join the two meetings in the same day, one in the afternoon, one is in the morning?
That's a long day. What day was the JOGC, Linda? I'm sorry.
JOCC's April 23rd, and it's a budget meeting, so it has to happen.
Yeah. Okay. That's, yep. Gotcha. Yeah. 9 a.m. Okay.
Any other comments before we take a vote? Okay, it looks like we're ready to vote.
We need a motion.
Adopt the dates as proposed by staff.
I second that.
And Ms. Martin, was that Ms. Martinez?
It was
Ms. Martin.
Martinez.
May I add a comment? Just, I wonder if we can, for the day that Trustee Moore cannot make it, is it possible they'll find a day that it will work for him? Do you decide for that, Trustee Moore?
Yeah, the problem for me is I'm going to be gone from June the 5th, and I don't come back until the 27th. And I'll be out of the country. So the whole month of June is gone. You'd have to move to another month just to accommodate me.
Got it.
So I'm just noticing everyone that I will have to miss that meeting.
Got it. Thank you for sharing.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes, I'm fine with that. I'm fine. I'll work around people's schedules. That's fine.
Ms. Mee?
Good.
Mr. Razo?
Yes, all the dates are fine for me.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
And Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
You?
Oh, Ms. Martin, I forgot to ask you.
Yes, I'm fine. I will make it work.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, next item, we'll be turning this over to Mr. Bendel. It's internal audit proposed fiscal 25-26 budget request.
Morning again, Chair Martin and trustees. I am requesting approval of the internal audit proposed budget for fiscal year 25-26, and upon approval, that you direct staff to include it in internal audits in LACERA's administrative budget, which goes to the JOGC next month and then to the boards in June for approval. The background of the memo summarizes the key Institute of Internal Auditors standards that require that the committee discuss the internal audit plan and approve a budget that is sufficient to ensure that internal audit has the necessary human resource staffing needs, as well as financial and technological resources necessary to complete the plan. Attachment A has a number of other standards that include a number of musts that the CAE must do each year in getting the audit plan approved and budget approved. Also, as indicated in the memo, though, due to the timing of the organization's budget cycle, which begins in December and culminates in June, and our audit plan risk assessment process, which we begin with, is next month at the April meeting, I've only provided you with a skeletal outline of our proposed audit plan at this time. We will kick off our risk assessment process next month at the April meeting and bring our final audit plan back to the committee for approval at the June meeting. I can, however, at this time, as I'm requesting the budget, provide you assurance that the resources requested in the budget will be sufficient for us to develop a robust and complete audit plan to address the risks of the organization. It is materially the same as last year's budget. The salaries and employee benefits section has not changed except for, cost of living increases. We still have we're not requesting any additional budgeted positions. We remain requesting we have a total of 11 budgeted positions. I'm very pleased to announce that we hired 2 new senior internal auditors last month, Delfino Aguilar and Christian Velasquez, and they can just wave from the audience. I'll actually introduce them more formally next month when we're all in person. However, we also are in the process of hiring for the remaining vacant internal auditor position, and that position will be fulfilled prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year. So I believe we have sufficient technological resources, and the budget provides sufficient resources for us also to hire external audit resources as necessary in areas that we don't have skills to perform the work internally. Finally, I want to point out that the only increase in this year's 2025 budget in the area of service and supplies is a $15,000 increase in the area of registrations for training, and that's just due to our experience and the costs having increased recently, as well as the fact that we're going to have 3 new staff on board next year. So I believe that we will have sufficient resources to provide that training. And with that, I'll take any questions or requests that you approve our budget for it to be sent to the JOGC for final approval.
I have a comment. Congratulations. You have filled these positions, and they are crucial as you go forward, and so you can do the work that's needed to be done. And I appreciate what you've done and the LACERA team to make that happen. So thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate the organization and human resources that's assisted us with that.
Yeah, well, I too am glad that you are going to be fully staffed, because now we can start building in some institutional knowledge instead of relying on, consultants that are transient. So I hope to see a lot more consistency and follow through in the efforts going forward. So I will move approval of your budget request.
I'll second it. I do have a question for Mr. Bindle.
Mm-hmm. You got the floor.
Richard, the 3 positions that came in from 23, 24, 24, 25, we had those vacancies, right? You guys had those vacancies, and so the 3 positions, they're still going to be outstanding vacancies, right?
No, the 2 senior positions have been filled now, and we have 1 remaining vacancy as the internal auditor position, which we're actually recruiting for right now. That exam closed, I believe, last week, and we're evaluating the applications that we have. We should have somebody on board in the next couple of months,
which will bring the staff up to full budget at
11 positions will be filled.
That's great, and yeah, that's to your office and also to human resources. Like Mr. Moore said, that's where we want to get, right? So yes, thanks for that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. The motion was made by Mr. Moore, second by Mr. Green. Roll call, Trustee Moore,
Aye.
Trustee Green,
Aye.
Trustee Durazo,
Aye.
Trustee Me,
Aye.
Trustee Martinez,
Yes.
and Chair Martin.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay. I just saw Stephen Rice go up there, so I wanted to pause a minute in case he had something to say.
Just coming up for the next item.
Okay, so do you want to do the introduction to the next item, Mr. Bendel?
Next item is the request for approval of Mr. Rice's budget, the ethics and compliance section budget. So I'll let Steve carry on with that.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Martin and trustees. The proposed 2025-2026 ethics and compliance budget includes funding for the first steps in hiring dedicated staff and operationalizing a separate and independent ethics and compliance office. The budget includes 9 months of salary and employee benefits for the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer, 6 months for the Senior Administrative Assistant that will support the office, and 3 months for the first Deputy Ethics and Compliance Officer. These personnel items are dependent upon county approval of the classifications and salaries. The classifications have already been provided to the county for advance review, so we are not expecting any delay once the JOG-C and the boards get final approval to the positions, which we plan to request at the April JOG-C and the May board meeting following the action that this committee will take today on the deputy classification and salaries. The budget also includes services and supplies to support the legal office and then the compliance office once it gets going in continuing the foundational ethics and compliance work plan provided to the ACRE and the boards last year and approved by ACRE and the boards. The approved work plans includes education, policy management, baseline ethics and compliance risk assessment, baseline ethics and compliance culture survey, the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer Chief and Deputy Ethics and Compliance Officer classifications and salaries, and revision of the Code of Ethical Conduct. And all of those activities are underway and will continue into the next fiscal year. Requested expenses include outside ethics and compliance counsel, Rebecca Walker. We continue to need her services to implement the program and get it off the ground. The Gartner consulting subscription that we found to be very, very valuable, and the cost of ongoing staff training to lay the groundwork for full implementation of the ethics and compliance program. Adequate resourcing of an ethics and compliance program is a best practice requirement of the U.S. sentencing guidelines for ethics and compliance programs. We believe that this budget will be sufficient to get the program started if the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer position is in fact filled in the fall, as we're projecting that person will be able to bring any adjustments to the committee and to the boards for approval at the mid-year budget adjustment through that normal process in December. And with that, we request approval of the proposed budget, which will be submitted to the boards after your action for inclusion in the 2025-26 budget.
Any items for anything for discussion?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Moore. Sorry.
Go ahead and move it then. And then
I'll move as proposed, and after your comment, I want to highlight what Mr. Rice had brought up about the reconciliation mid-year.
Okay, I'll second the motion, and then my question is, there are two places that, Steve, that you said you're waiting for approval of the Board of Supervisors. I'm not certain that I feel comfortable with those words approval. I'd rather say we're waiting for the final steps to be concluded by the Board of Supervisors.
They do need action, does need to be taken. Let's put it that way. Action needs to be taken by the Board of Supervisors in incorporating them into the salary ordinance.
Yeah, can we just make those changes? And well, one of them is just in the report. And one of them is on one of the organization charts or something. There's an org chart on page 58. So page 48 and 58.
The change being a reference to supervisor action?
Yeah, instead of approval.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Green made the motion. Mr. Moore second. Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Razzo?
Aye.
Ms. Mee?
Aye.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Chair Martin?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Madam Chair, if I may, can I field a couple of questions with Mr. Rice as far as because Mr. Moore, with the ordinance, the development of a new ordinance position authorization, Mr. Moore brings up a valid point with, it's like pulling teeth to get a new ordinance position. This isn't going to fall dead at the CEO's office, is it?
Well, we don't have any guarantees of what the outcome is going to be, but the classifications have been run by the CEO's office. They provided their input. It's not material. The salaries are in line with the existing salaries in the internal audit office. So we would be surprised. And the county, by the way, is right now in the process of forming their own ethics and compliance office. We're a little bit ahead of them in that process, but I think they will recognize the importance of LACERA having an ethics and compliance office. They feel they need one themselves. They have not objected to the classifications that we provided to them. So notwithstanding that the lawsuit remains open, we expect that they will, and we really do expect them to approve these positions. But of course, there are no guarantees. They could change their mind.
Okay, thank you for addressing that. And so then, and our recourse, of course, after if for some reason is because we've identified this as far as our master plan, it's already been approved to move forward with this acre restructuring, and so without getting it tied up with a bunch of red tape, do we have recourse under any other any way else to get the job done in line with our administrative duties and what we've determined the need for this position?
Well, as the committee and boards have directed so far, the legal office will continue with foundational efforts until such time as the dedicated staff arrives.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
We will continue to advance the program. It's very important that we not stop or stall in our efforts pending the arrival of the permanent staff.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Trustee Mee?
Yeah, follow up on the same discussion. Thank you, Trustee Green. Have similar question, and then I was thinking, Steve, do you mind to remind us the timeline of the court case? I do hope the process go board supervisor smoothly. Worst scenario, right? If the court case come out favorable on our end, then we can make our own decision, correct?
That's correct. We still have to go through the Board of Supervisors, but but if we prevail, as we expect we will in the Supreme Court, it'll be a ministerial responsibility of the supervisors. The timeline for the lawsuit is that briefing will be completed by May, and then it'll be with the court to schedule oral argument. Optimistically, we hope the oral argument will be in 2026. And with the decision that would follow under court rules 90 days thereafter. So by early 2026 or early 2026, we should have a decision. We believe the argument will be optimistically this year, 2025, and that the decision will be 90 days thereafter. So should be in the first quarter or 2 quarters of 2026.
Got it. Thank you.
Anybody else? I just want to say thank you to Mr. Rice and to Trustee Me to remind us where we are on the lawsuit. That's a good piece of information. Now, is this the point, Richard, that I'm supposed to call on you? Because I did it wrong earlier.
Calling me for what? I'm sorry.
We're ready to move to the orientation.
No, I believe the next presenter is Carly Natoya. Ms. Natoya.
Oh, I missed Carly.
Talking about it. Yep. So
Sorry, Carly. You're up.
Good morning, trustees. I am here to present an item or two recommendations for your consideration. One, the creation and salary allocation of the Deputy Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer classification. So there was a short conversation with Mr. Rice about the budget, which we talked on the program and the need for these classifications. So I'm just going to give a kind of high-level overview of process and need, and then stand for questions. So generally, the process for the creation of a new classification and its salary allocation lies with the JOC. However, because of the ACRE Committee's oversight responsibility for LACERA's ethics and compliance program, we thought it was appropriate to bring to this committee the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer classification, which was approved in December, and this classification, the Deputy Chief Ethics, I always get tied up, Deputy Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer. So going forward, I'm going to use Chief and Deputy, just to avoid being tongue-tied and to be clear. So let's see. We are asking for the creation of 2 Deputy Chief Ethics and Compliance Officers, and each one will focus on ethics and compliance issues in specialized areas of LACERA's operations, related laws, regulations, policies, as to enable the development of specific expertise in the ethics office for the administration of the ethics program. So the ethics and compliance charter is attached to this item as attachment A. And so this committee, because of its oversight role and the expected working relationship, has been asked to review both the deputy and the chief classifications and their salary allocations. Other than that, should this committee approve, it will go to the JOC, hopefully next month. And the JOC has traditional responsibility for to review and make recommendations on staff requests for new classifications and their initial salary allocations. So why now? As Mr. Rice covered, the ethics and compliance program is a part of the strategic objective, compliance and enterprise risk management. We're moving forward. This committee has already approved the ethics and compliance charter, and we're attempting to stand up an office. So this office will provide ongoing assurance and accountability that LACERA's operations are ethical, compliant, and promote continuous improvement throughout the organization. So the ethics program was created in accordance with the Institute of Internal Auditors 3 lines model, where the ethics and compliance function is within management, and that's the second line. And the other 2 lines are the operations and internal audit. So this classification, the deputy, will assist the CISO or the chief with the development, direction, and management of the overall ethics and compliance office, programs. It'll administer conflicts of interest and operational ethics and compliance throughout the organization. So how was this position developed? Similar to the chief position, we did look around for benchmarks throughout similar organizations. So some pension organizations, some other government organizations, and we did not find a great match. So we have relied on internal benchmarking. We are benchmarking internally with the audit, with internal audit. So our chief is aligned with the chief auditor, and these 2 deputy positions are aligned with the 2 principal internal auditor positions. So let's see, page 7 provides some compensation information. It shows where the deputy is proposed to align internally, 1 within ethics and 2 within the larger organization. And if implemented as budgeted with 2 positions, it would be around $500,000. So you just heard from Mr. Rice. And he's asking for one position to be budgeted currently so that we could fill it currently. But we want to make sure that it's clear to the committee that we will be asking for 2 positions in the ordinance. So that even though we fill one next year, we already have the other ready to be filled whenever we are ready to fill the position. So we want to get 2 in the ordinance. We're going to send the request for 2 down to the county so that it can be added to the ordinance, 2 classifications. We are budgeting for 1.
Okay,
And I
thank you.
think that's it.
I have a couple questions. Remind me where the chief fits in the organization.
Well, currently, the office will be housed within legal for reporting purposes. So I always say that someone has to approve their time off. So it will be an administrative report to, I think coming to the rescue. It will a report.
Just an assist, not
Yeah,
asking.
thank you. An administrative reporting to the legal services office, but eventually we'd like this office to stand alone and then report out to the CEO and the Acre Committee. How many of those things did I get right?
You're in the ballpark.
Thank you.
So the chief will report directly to the CEO and the Acre Committee and the boards, and administratively. See, you didn't need me. Administratively to Mr. Rice while the office sits in legal, and eventually, see, you did get it right. It will stand on its own.
Thank you. One more question. Is the chief classified? I can't remember. Unclassified?
It is a classified position.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And
However, both management.
what level is that compared to the 118J? What is their schedule? Do you know?
The chief?
Yeah.
LS 12. So it's in LS 12.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay, that makes total sense to me. I'll open the floor for more discussion. Trustee Me.
Thank you, Chair Martin. I remember we have a salary study for the entire organization that is currently being conducted by consultant. Is that correct?
No.
I believe in board investment, we request for salary study
Yes.
analysis.
In the investment
that's-
office, yes. And there's one going on in RHC also, but not throughout the organization.
I was just wondering that if that study including this new position as part of the study, so we have a better reference. Well, what you have already good, right? But more information, even better.
Thank you.
I don't know if this helps, Trustee Me. With all my experience in this area, and I know a lot of people have experience, this makes sense. This makes sense organizationally, at least to me. So I just want to share that information.
And we've got an org chart coming up for you to give it more visual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Everyone's comfortable. But I still feel like, if the study doesn't cost anything additional, including this position, just have a comparison with other organizations, just making sure we're paying, appropriately to compete for talents, right? So what we have right now, comparing internally, sounds great. It sounds fit, sounds right. I totally agree, right? Just the other reference.
Understood.
Yeah, so we did do some benchmarking externally. And the issue with the benchmarking is we like to compare apples to apples and then oranges to oranges. We did not find any apples that are similar to our apples. So in the terms of pension world, we're a little bit advanced in implementing this program. And then just looking around at other compliance and ethics programs, they had differing responsibilities. Some more, some less, and some just different than our position. So it was a little hard to make an appropriate match on the outside. We did look at how our salary would compare, and it would be competitive. We don't think that we'll have a recruiting problem.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move to approve, please.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Martinez, Trustee Martinez.
Yes, I was just moving to approve.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And I had a question.
Okay.
And my question is, if it is the same title, why is it that we're requesting 2 at this time? Is it a concern for the future as far as not being granted a second position with the same title?
So we would like to propose and provide the organization as it will be in completion. So attachment B is the proposed org chart, and we do see a need for 2 deputies in the future. So it would be the same classification, just 2 positions to cover all of the scope of work that needs to be done within the organization.
And the thinking, Mr. Razzo, is the way that we have an AEO over 2 sides of the house, we would have a DCEO over those same 2 sides of the house. So it's split that way.
Do you know the time frame for the hire for the second?
No.
Would it be, within a year, 5 years? Is there any sense of time?
Yeah,
That second position?
if I may, through the chair, Ms.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
So appreciate the question, Trustee Durazo. As Carly mentioned, we want to build the structure for the future. One of the things the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer is going to do first is assess needs. So we don't want to add positions until we fully know the scope of work that the new chief will bring on. So these positions may not be filled for a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years, until we build out the program. So the timeline for the deputy is probably more long-term. Really the focus in the next 12 months will be to get the chief ethics and compliance officer on board. And then once we have that individual, we want to make sure we have the flexibility of not having to go back to the county for these ordinance positions. So it's really more of a long-term play.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we have the motion, so we have to do the vote, correct?
Yes.
We need a second.
Second, I'll second it.
Ms. Martinez made the motion, Mr. Moore second. Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Green? I know he's here.
Chief, unmute yourself.
You may have had to step away.
Okay. Mr. Razzo?
Aye.
Ms. Mee?
Aye.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Chair Martin?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Now I'm up to do that introduction of the training for you today.
Finally, sorry.
Yes. Well, I don't know if I'm animated enough to make this sincere, but we have an action-packed and exciting agenda for you this morning. This came about as the chair, vice chair, and the committee last year expressed interest in having more comprehensive training in each of the areas. If you go to the next slide, we have the agenda there. In each of the areas of the ACA committee's responsibilities. And this may go under the saying, be careful what you ask for. But seriously, this is all very relevant to your role in the committee. Everything today ties into your ACA committee charter and also to the IA 3 lines model that I'll be going over shortly. The presentations today are designed not only to let you know what staff does in each of the areas under your areas of purview as on the ACA committee, but also clarifies and explains your responsibilities to carry out your fiduciary duty as a trustee on the ACA committee. So it goes without saying, please stop us at any point to ask questions. Mr. Jensen, your consultant, is also available to address questions at any time through our presentations. After my introduction, Alicia Collins will present on the ACA and internal audit roles, responsibilities, and processes, followed by Allison Barrett, who will cover ACA ethics and compliance roles, responsibilities, and processes. And then Steve Rice will talk about values and culture. Following that, I will cover LACERA risk management and internal audit risk assessments. And then last but not least, we have Kristen Hunt and Amanda Cronk from Plant Moran to talk about an overview of external financial audit process, an overview of the external financial audit process, and Brent Bannister from CAVMAC, our actuarial auditor, to give an overview of the actuarial audit process. Next slide, please. So the 3 lines model, and you may have seen this before, and I looked at this and thought, how do I explain this to the audit committee? So I actually asked ChatGPT, how do I explain the 3 lines model to the audit committee in easy to understand terms? And I actually learned, something myself in the way that it came back. So I put the question in, and it came back with that the first line of responsibility. You see the governing body up above. That's the boards and the ACA committee. You've got management below that, and you've got internal audit over to the right. The ACA committee's responsibility is within those green lines that you see there, the second and third line roles. So management is over the first line roles. And what ChatGPT said is the first line of the doers, the people on the ground that make the daily decisions, Santos and the executive team, the division managers and process owners. Excuse me, my throat is closing up. The division managers, process owners, and frontline teams of staff, they are responsible for taking and managing risks to do their jobs, to accomplish the objectives of the organization. Just like in a football game, they are the players actively executing plays and adjusting to challenges. And I thought that was a great analogy. So the football team, fighting to win the game. The second line, and that's the ethics and compliance and enterprise risk management functions, as well as some of the other second line functions. This group supports the first line by providing expertise, monitoring risks, and ensuring compliance with policies and regulations. They are like the coaches and referees, making sure the game is played within the rules and advising on strategy to achieve future success. And the third line, that's us internal auditors. We're independent and objective. They assess how well the first 2 lines are doing their job and provide assurance to leadership in the ACA committee and the boards. Assurance is letting you know that things are being done right in compliance with your policies and procedures, the way that you think the organization is being run, making sure that it's being done correctly. Think of them as the review committee that watches the game footage to identify weaknesses and suggest improvements. The audit committee and governing bodies sit at the top. The boards and the ACA committee ensure the whole system is working correctly. They set the organization goals, ethics, and risk appetite, like the team's owners and general managers, ensuring long-term success. So key takeaways from this model is that the first line owns and manages the risks. The second line supports and oversees risk management. And the third line provides that independent assurance on the effectiveness of the first 2 lines. Next slide, please. So there was a question a little bit earlier, I think, when Ms. Natoya was speaking about where the committee sits. And you can see in this, this just really shows you where the committee sits. It's a committee of the 2 boards. And the boards are, and again, within that green circle, you have the chief ethics and compliance function, and then the internal audit function. The only thing incorrect on this slide is that the dotted line from the chief ethics and compliance officer should be a solid line to Mr. Kryman. The dotted line for internal audit is to ensure that independence. So we report administratively to Mr. Kryman, but only functionally to the audit committee, whereas the chief ethics and compliance officer reports both functionally to the CEO. It is a management position. Ethics and compliance is a management function, but also reports to the ACA committee and the Board of Retirement. Both boards or Board of Retirement? Anybody? Both boards. Yeah, okay, sorry. So next slide, please. The purpose of the ACA committee is to provide structured, systematic oversight of LACERA's governance, risk management, ethics, compliance, and internal controls. The ACA committee fulfills this oversight by essentially obtaining assurance that the organization is operating effectively and efficiently in compliance with laws, bylaws, organization policies, and procedures by obtaining that assurance from multiple sources. Next slide, please. We talked about the internal audit assurance. Internal audit assurance provided by the independent work performed by internal audit, including audits, reviews, continuous process tests, and evaluation of risk management, internal controls, and governance. But assurance is also provided by the external auditors. We have Plant Moran currently as our external auditor. And we're not, as a public pension plan, there's not a lot of regulation. We have our laws that we need to comply with, but there are regulators, the IRS and Center for Medicare, that do periodically perform regulatory audits of the organization as well. And then there's other third-party assurance. These are other external auditors. We currently have Moss Adams performing our SOC audits. And we have, again, Plant Moran doing, not Plant Moran, CAVMAC doing the audit of our actuarial processes. And so we have other third-party assurance providers as well. And then there's management assurance provided by management, including internal risk management practices and monitoring, the enterprise risk management function, and the first and second line functions that are performed by management also provide assurance and provide aligned assurance between these parties. When Steve Rice, Allison Barrett, and Rebecca Walker were presenting and making their case for the establishment of a formal enterprise ethics and compliance program at LACERA, the board asked whether it was going to be duplicative of the work of internal audit. My answer was no, and I emphasized the different focus that ethics and compliance will have, and the importance of ethics and compliance just in a mature organization to have that function. And Ms. Barrett and Mr. Rice are going to talk further about how important that is for the maturity of the organization. It also provides internal audit with aligned assurance. We have more people looking at the system of controls, and we're able to use that to make sure we define a more risk-based and sharpened audit plan to cover the areas that we need to cover to give you that assurance. Not only does internal audit benefit from that aligned assurance, but so does the committee and the boards. And the goal of aligned assurance is to close any risk gaps, coordinate risk assessment efforts, and prevent assurance fatigue. Let me see. I think that may be it. Go to the next slide. I will take any questions at this point before I introduce Ms. Collins to continue with the next agenda item. Any concerns or questions from anybody at this point? Hearing none, I will introduce Felicia Collins to carry on with the next item, ACRE and internal audit roles and responsibilities.
Okay, good morning, trustees. Okay, I want to start with a question. What makes an ACRE committee truly effective? Okay, there's probably a lot of things that come to mind. And so during this first part of your orientation, I'm going to provide you with the answer to that question. I'll cover the importance of the ACRE committee, your critical roles and responsibilities, and also the work that we do in internal audit to assist you in fulfilling your duties. So let's get started with this next slide. Next slide. Okay, so one of the ways to have an effective ACRE committee is by having a well-defined and current charter. The way we do this is by having our annual reviews and approval of your charter. Most recently, that was done at your recent the September meeting last year. So since we have a lot of trustees returning to the committee, you may recall that we had a very comprehensive review of your charter and some good discussions during that meeting. Overall, we went away with updating your charter so it fully reflected your current roles and responsibilities. Because remember, we went from an audit committee to an ACRE committee. We also updated the charter with the new internal audit standards, as well as best practices relating to audit committees. So by going through that exercise, we came away with a well-defined and a clear charter. Now, provided in your materials is a copy of the charter, and I'll be referencing that throughout this part of the orientation. One of the key areas I want to focus in on is your oversight of internal audit activities. And listed here are those three primary areas relating to this. And that's in section 7A of your charter. This last pillar, financial reporting process, I'm not going to cover. There is another session later in your orientation that will cover that part. So I'm going to focus on these first two sections, specifically your monitoring of internal audit activities. There are 11 duties relating to internal audit oversight, and I have them listed on the next slide. As you can see, there's a wide range of duties. And most importantly is that we describe them as essential conditions prescribed by the Institute of Internal Auditors Global Internal Audit Standards. So just a little background regarding these standards. These are those guiding principles that an effective internal audit division follows. It provides the best practices for audits, also the guidance on performing our audit engagements and the audit activities as well. So, this is important that the committee is monitoring our conformance, because that gives you the assurance that we are providing information to you that meets these standards, and you can rely on our information that we're providing. Now, based on the standards, we have these 11 essential conditions. I'm going to highlight some of the key aspects, beginning with that first line here. And that relates to the committee's authority to ensure internal audit's independence. Next slide, and we'll see how this is reflected in the placement of the internal audit division in our organization chart. Now, as you see here, the lines of reporting have been established so that we report administratively to the executive office and functionally to the ACRE committee. This structure allows for our independence, which is essential to maintaining our integrity and objectivity. Now, another way to have an effective ACRE committee is to have a competent and experienced internal audit division. So I just want to take a moment just to highlight our audit team. We're a very diverse and experienced audit team with a minimum of 8 years of experience to 41 years of experience. Now, just a fun fact, I calculated the total years of audit experience for our audit team. Are any guesses how many years that equals?
250.
Oh, you're close. It's 205. Actually. So with that comes a vast amount of years of experience and auditing, extensive knowledge and auditing experience and standards and practices, and also conducting a wide range of audit engagements from operational to financial to compliance. Another strong point of our audit team is that we all hold a professional designation. More than half of our team have CPAs, and then we have several that have a certified internal auditors designation. The CISA are certified information system auditors, and then we have a certified fraud examiner as well. And we always are striving to enhance our competencies. We belong to several different professional affiliations, such as the Association of Public Pension Fund Auditors, and we do at least 40 hours, and usually it's more, of continuing education each year. Next slide. Another key role of the ACRE committee is to review and approve our audit plan. Now, the audit plan is going to be one of the most critical documents that you'll receive from us. This tells you how we're allocating our resources and our time. It lets the committee, let me move on. The audit plan is risk-based, and we provide it to the committee at the June meeting. Now, the ACRE committee is involved in several different steps when it comes to the review, the approval of the audit plan as well as the execution. So as part of our process, because we do have a risk-based audit plan, we start with our risk assessment. That's when we're looking at the full universe of all the possible areas that we can audit. And then we assess the risk, because we're trying to identify those areas, those critical areas that we need to apply some internal audit resources. Once we do that, we have a meeting. In April, Richard will be discussing our risk assessment, kicking off that process and asking for your input. Now, upon approval of the audit committee for our audit plan, then we're executing it. That means we're going out, we're doing our audits, we're doing the different projects on that audit plan. Once a audit has been completed, we have the report, we provide to the committee, and then if there's any recommendations, we follow up on the recommendations, and we also provide updates to the committee at each of the meetings. Okay. I'll move to the next slide. Now, picture here is just a snapshot of our 2025 audit plan. A copy of the plan is also included in your materials. Now, in order to be an effective ACRE committee, the committee should be aware of the work being done by Internal Audit Division. This is why we bring to the committee an update on our progress as far as completing our audit plan at each meeting. Also important to remember is that our audit plan is a living document. So periodically, we do need to make changes. It may be due to resources. It may be that we identify another area that requires some urgent attention as far as an audit. And so when that occurs, we do bring an amendment to the committee for review and approval. Next slide. Now, on our audit plan, there's basically 4 areas of activities. The first type is assurance engagements. This is where we'll provide an objective examination of evidence for the purpose of providing an independent assessment to management and the committee. Examples include our audit of the procurement process, the audit that we did of termination of user access, and our credit card reviews as well. Now, advisory types of engagements are where we provide management with formal assessments and advice for improving the organization's governance, risk management, and control processes. An example would be currently we have a advisory engagement of human resource operations, and so it's where we're acting more as a consultant in order to provide some suggestions and areas for opportunities to make some improvements. And then there's a value-added projects. This is when internal audit provides an informal advice to management. By having internal audit involved at the beginning of a project, it provides insight and foresight and aids management in identifying and managing risks effectively. An example would be participation on several different types of process teams, our reviews of assessments and assessments of organization culture. Now, lastly is internal audit operations. So on our audit plan, there is a section, you'll see various tasks that we have on our audit plan. Those are the areas where we are reviewing our own internal operations, and then we identify if there's any areas where we need to make our own improvements. Example include how currently we're updating our operation manual. We are developing some new KPIs, which we'll be bringing to the committee as well. And then most importantly is that in April, we'll be bringing you our 3-year roadmap. Next slide. Now, at most meetings, we're providing the committee our audit reports. This is how we communicate results of our audit engagements. Now, by the committee being aware of this provides you with more information so that you're able to make those informed decisions. Now, in all reports, we're going to provide you basic information, the background objectives, the scope. I want to just point out a couple of things so that you can look at the report and quickly identify just the importance or the impact that the audit has. So in each report, we provide an audit rating. And in the example of on my dashboard, you can see that's at the top left side. And we rate each audit. Either it's going to be satisfactory, which means it's a pretty clean audit, neither low findings or very minimal findings, or it can be opportunities for improvement, which means that we had some maybe medium, high level findings. And there's a lot of areas where there is a need for improvement, or it will be rated unsatisfactory. Those are the types of audits where there's significant problems noted. So when you pick up a report and you look at the audit rating, you know immediately what level of impact or if there are any significant problems that were identified from this audit. In addition to that is that within each of our reports, we're also going to have our recommendations. Recommendations also include a management response, and the timing of implementation. We also rate the findings, high, medium, and low. Again, this is to signify the importance or the impact of the findings as well. Okay. So as I said, we provide our audit reports at each meeting, and then there's 4 options which are listed here on this slide as far as review and approval. Next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have those recommendations. Question is what comes next? We follow up on all recommendations, and the ACRE committee is an active part of that process. So when we have the recommendations, we have a tracking system that we use in order to monitor all the recommendations until they're fully implemented. On a monthly basis, we meet with management to discuss the progress. We record that. If they're indicating that a reco has been closed, then we do our due diligence. We have a lot of testing that we'll do to verify that the recommendation has been implemented as intended. And we provide that update to the ACRE committee at each meeting. So you're well aware of those recommendations, how long it's taking to implement them, and if there are any delays or any issues as well. So listed here on this dashboard is some of the information that we provide to the ACRE committee. Like there's an aging of any of the open recommendations. We identify if it's high, medium, or low, and the total of the recommendations. And I think one point I just want to make also regarding recommendation follow-up is that the committee's oversight is a vital part of this, because we want the committee to be aware of if there's any issues, as well as asking those questions to management as far as, you know, what is going on with some of these recommendations, what's the progress being made, if there are any issues that they should be made aware of as well. Next slide. We're going to move to slide 15. Okay. I'm sorry, slide 14. One up. Maybe right there. Perfect. Okay. Now, as far as monitoring, the ACRE committee is not only responsible for the monitoring internal audit activities, but as well as our partners, which are the external audit firms that we use. And currently we have, you know, most importantly is our financial auditor. Key role of the ACRE committee is the hiring of the financial auditor. In addition to that, we have a pool of firms that we use. You may recall that a couple of years ago, we did issue an RFP to hire some firms to be in this pool. We use them on an as-needed basis, and those firms are listed here. We're currently undergoing a new RFP to extend or expand our pool as well. In the upcoming meetings, we'll be bringing some additional firms for approval from the ACRE committee and add it into our pool. Now, we've used these firms on an as-needed basis. Some of the audit engagements that they perform include an IT review, organizational governance, and a human resources audit. Next. Slide 15. Okay. So provided in your materials is also the ACRE calendar, and here's just a snapshot of the events. The calendar has the full spectrum of all the duties associated with the ACRE committee. It's a way that we're able to keep ourselves accountable, as well as making sure that we're progressing through and completing all the tasks for the ACRE committee. Now, listed here on this sort of summary of the calendar are some of those key items that we discussed and the meetings that they will be discussed at. And overall, I mean, this is where we bring the audit reports, the annual risk assessment, and so forth. And as I said, there's a full listing that's part of your attachments. Okay. So this concludes my presentation. I hope I provided some clarity and insight in the answers to the question that I posed at the beginning of this presentation. As discussed, an effective ACRE committee has clearly defined qualities and responsibilities. They maintain and monitor oversight of an internal audit department, and they ensure conformance or compliance and support effective governance. And I believe our audit committee has established the foundation to achieve all of these. With that, I'll address any questions if you have any.
I have a comment. So this is great. And as you know, I go way back in this area, and I've said it more than once. I think it's one of the most solid internal control, internal audit groups I've ever seen. And I just want you to keep up the good work. And I think the takeaway for me is that for the trustees is that, you know, it's reading the audit reports, and it's not really a financial or a CPA. If you just have some good common sense, which I think all of us do, it's not too hard. The audit reports kind of drive it, though I do want us to be creative as a board on, you know, other areas of risks, other areas of risks that maybe LACERA hasn't thought of. And that's a little bit harder question, I think, to ask ourselves. But I'm really glad we're doing these trainings. I think they're important, and thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I echo that. Ms. Collins, this presentation is really good, and you know, it flows, and the reports too. I mean, you know, they're easily easier read than others, as far as, you know, where the audit committee's at with the projects, and you know, I agree, and you know, to your point, Madam Chair, as far as the things to think about, you know, I think, you know, the IT stuff is new, right? That's our big kind of next horizon that we're looking at, IT and the risk of, you know, in artificial intelligence and stuff like that. And I mean, that's going to be a you know, possible new area, new frontier, so to speak, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
I agree. That's very fair to say. The whole world should be looking at it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Ms. Collins, thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome. And Trustee Me, you have a question?
Quick comment, like completely, you know, agree and echo the same thing. I appreciate you listened to us last year that given us training. This is really helpful for trustee the first time in touch with this line of work, right? So last year was the first time like joining an audit committee in my whole career life ever, you know, do this. So this is really, really great. And I want to emphasize some point that from the training, from everything we learned so far, it's important to recognize that audit committee need to have the completely independency, you know, that they can do work without any influence, any power, any persuasion one way or the other. They have to have the independent judgment to bring it to the committee. And then I want to say that we have your back. You know, we are here to support you do your work. So keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before our next person's up? Okay.
Good morning again, trustees. I'm going to start out with a little story, and unfortunately, it is a true one. In October of 2018, Lion Air Flight 610, a Boeing 737 MAX, went down. 189 souls lost. Neither Boeing's audit committee nor its board had received any substantive reporting on airplane safety at any point prior to the fatal crash. The company valued revenue over everything, including its number one regulatory compliance risk, airplane safety. Even after the 2018 crash, reports to the audit committee and board were limited to how the tragedy impacted the company's bottom line. Boeing still lacked any formal board-level process to oversee airplane safety. If the committee had effective oversight of the mission-critical risk of safety, it would have learned that as early as 2016, 2 years before the crash, there was a known manufacturing defect in the 737, which senior leadership effectively covered up. They failed to disclose the issue to the FAA, going so far as to leave possible in-flight course corrections for the defect out of the pilot instruction manuals, which was discovered when they reviewed the black box that they were looking for this possible course correction. About 6 months following the tragedy, the Wall Street Journal became aware of the 737's mechanical flaws. And still, no substantial reporting about airplane safety was made by leadership to the governing authority. Despite the publicity, the main concern still was reputation. Neither the Boeing's audit committee nor its board made reasonable inquiry, simply asked into the very apparent safety issue. And so, in March of 2019, another Boeing 737, Ethiopian Air Flight 302, went down due to the very same mechanical failure. Another 157 souls lost for a problem that could and should have been discovered by Boeing's board after the first crash, if not sooner. It took the FAA grounding Boeing's entire 737 MAX fleet for its governing authority to request and receive meaningful reports and finally have oversight of airplane safety for this billion-dollar airplane manufacturing company. No, LACERA is not making airplanes. However, this committee and LACERA's boards are entrusted to safeguard the $86 billion pension fund of over 180,000 Los Angeles County employees. Next slide. So today, we're going to review the ACRE Committee's oversight duty as articulated in the charter, which is attached to your materials. We're going to consider program authority, reporting structure, and now hopefully you will see your obviously critical, the critical importance of your oversight role. Next slide. Ethics and its partner compliance are defined in the Ethics and Compliance Program Charter, which you all approved last year, and it was finalized in October, and that's attached to your materials as well. Very briefly, ethics is exercising sound judgment and diligently following LACERA's values to always do the right thing. Compliance is what it says, complying with laws, regulations, policies, and procedures. Next slide. As most of you have heard me say before, but I'm going to say it again, the program has hefty authority. Ethics and compliance are an inherent part of the trustee's constitutionally mandated fiduciary duty to administer the retirement system with care, skill, prudence, and diligence to ensure the prompt delivery of benefits to our members. The Ethics and Compliance Program and the ACRE Committee charters were drafted under the umbrella of this fiduciary duty and in accordance with the United States Sentencing Guidelines and the Department of Justice Evaluation of Corporate Compliance Programs, which both establish the best practices and leading standards for ethics and compliance programs. These are the standards that the federal government uses to assess compliance programs during investigations and enforcement actions. And so these are the same high standards to which you, the ACRE Committee, will hold the LACERA's Ethics and Compliance Program accountable. Next slide, please. The ACRE Committee's primary duty with ethics and compliance is oversight, ensuring that systems of control exist and are being implemented. According to the sentencing guidelines, as well as common sense, this means that the ACRE Committee must be knowledgeable about the program. Effective oversight requires that the compliance and control functions have direct access to the committee and the boards for regular reporting about program activities, ethics and compliance risks, and controls to mitigate those risks. Next slide, please. So here is the org chart that I was referencing earlier, and it demonstrates this direct access, namely the independence of the CECO and their functional reporting relationship to the CEO, the ACRE, and the boards. And I will pause here to make sure that there are no lingering questions on this org chart and also to get a sip of water. Okay, next slide. The direct reporting relationship facilitates the committee's responsibility to establish and oversee a well-designed, adequately resourced, and fully functioning ethics and compliance program. Prior to Boeing, back in 1966, The courts determine boards may be held liable if there's a systematic failure to exercise reasonable oversight and sufficiently remediate any known or foreseeable legal violation. That was in a case called Caremark. Fast forward to 2021, when Boeing shareholders brought suit against their board, and it was determined that at a minimum, the committee and boards must have oversight of mission critical risk areas. In Boeing's case, that was airplane safety. Stated in plain English, when things go wrong, the question becomes, did the committee and boards know, or should they have known about the risk for misconduct or a legal violation? Was there a failure of oversight? If the answer is yes, trustees may be held liable. Next slide. As we learned from Boeing, oversight requires committee knowledge of the program's operation. You cannot oversee what you don't know. So the Ethics and Compliance Office will provide, and has been providing since its infancy, which is a few months ago, quarterly reports to the committee and boards on program activity. But it's not simply the Ethics and Compliance Office's duty to report, as we saw in Boeing, but the committee's duty to make reasonable inquiry when issues become apparent. Do not wait for the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, or worse, a federal investigation. Next slide. The key to effective oversight is the three fundamental questions that the DOJ asks when it is conducting investigations and enforcement actions. Is the ethics and compliance program well designed? Is the program applied earnestly and in good faith? And does the program work well in practice? And what does this all mean? Let's go through one at a time. Next slide. Is the program well designed? When the Ethics and Compliance Office reports on program activities, the committee is charged with inquiring about whether the program has been structured in response to and adequately controls for the risks that are specific to LACERA. Whether LACERA has adequate policies, training, and other controls in place to prevent, detect, and mitigate its unique risks, and whether training and communication efforts are tailored to control for those unique risks. Next slide. Is the program being applied earnestly and in good faith? Here, oversight requires inquiry into whether the program has adequate resources and is empowered to function effectively. Does the program have the budget, the people, and the authority to complete the work in its 3-year roadmap coming soon and its annual work plan? Are senior leaders and supervisors, and actually also trustees, following LACERA's ethical standards and reinforcing compliance in day-to-day operations, with each member counseled and every single benefit paid? Next slide, please. Does the program work in practice? And this is perhaps the most important question. Quite simply, is the program operational? Is it being monitored and implemented, or is it simply a paper program? Did we write a nice charter and then we stuck it in a drawer? No. When misconduct occurs, not a plane crash, but say a data leak, time card fraud, harassment, or maybe rogue use of AI, which we're currently using Copilot, does the program conduct an adequate root cause analysis to determine what contributed to the violation and also the remediation required to prevent similar events in the future? Are we continuously improving? Does the program make recommendations to adjust controls or even adjust the entire program framework where necessary in response to violations or misconduct? Or does the program do nothing, like Boeing, until there is a second disaster or a federal investigation? Next slide, please. Once the CECO is hired and the Ethics and Compliance Office fully established, the committee will receive timely reports on each of these 13 items listed on this slide. In the interim, under the ACRE-approved foundational work plan, the legal office will continue to provide regular reports on, and this committee will oversee the development of a few of these activities, such as, next slide, please, oversight of ethics and compliance risk assessments. The top of the slide provides what is listed in the charter, the ACRE charter. The bottom spells out what the oversight obligations look like in practice. With risk assessments, the committee will ensure that ethics and compliance risk assessments adequately address mission-critical risks and will oversee the collaboration between ethics and compliance and internal audit in the risk assessment process, which is called aligned assurance, which Richard discussed earlier. Next slide. In practice, ACRE oversight of policies and procedures includes policy governance, the code of ethical conduct, and the committee ensuring that LACERA has adequate policies and procedures in place to address mission critical risks. Next slide. Like the proverbial tree in the forest, if the program is not communicated and no one is properly educated, then it will not make any impact. So ACRE's oversight of training and communications includes the committee receiving regular reporting on the ethics and compliance communication and training plan, also coming soon, and ensuring training is proportionate to risk. The higher the risk, the more comprehensive the training. And also ensuring that the training is working, reviewing reports, measuring training effectiveness. Next slide, please. ACRE will oversee surveys measuring LACERA's culture of ethics and compliance and ensure that controls are developed in response to survey findings. At a minimum, a strong culture of ethics and compliance should include, and the ACRE committee should oversee and inquire about the following. Does LACERA have a strong speak up culture? Are there reporting channels for staff to report ethics and compliance risks or violations? And does LACERA have a policy for and demonstrate an absolute commitment to non-retaliation? Does LACERA practice organizational justice? Are incentives for compliance or discipline for non-compliance applied fairly, equitably, and consistently, regardless of an employee's position or title? And lastly, does LACERA staff perceive leadership as committed to ethics and compliance, otherwise known as tone at the top? Next slide, please. Well, anyway, I think we have a glitch. The next slide is actually, are there any questions about your ethics and compliance oversight duties?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, if I may.
Please.
Ms. Barrett, this presentation is amazing. It has teeth, and I love that. It is important. You know, George Carlin always talked about words, right? And softening of words between, you know, battle fatigue and then, you know, battle stress syndrome, adding more syllables and stuff like that. You know, your Boeing example, I mean, it is, you know, it's really, really good, right? It's that deviation of normalcy, right? Normalization of deviance. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Everybody disappeared. So
yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, but you know, that's exactly why. Now, you know, the government loves their acronyms, and going from Audit Committee to ACRE, it's kind of counterintuitive to what George Carlin said. We've added more syllables and made an acronym, and but again, your point about you know, being able to identify the risk and you know, face your danger, right? We talk about this, and you know, I always make the connection with, you know, firefighting and stuff like that, but internally, you know, so we don't have that deviation of normalcy, like you alluded to, like writing a policy and then putting it in a drawer somewhere. And the language, and I encourage you and everybody else, like, I love your presentation, the strong wording, mission critical, you know, strong language, you know, language matters. And the point, you know, and this is for everybody, you know, at LACERA, you know, these things need to, there's a seriousness to all of it. And so, you know, not to hold people to the fire and have them operate in fear to meet these mission critical things, but understanding, you know, what we're all here to do. And I just want to give you some feedback on that I really appreciate this. And you know, yeah, you know, and it's funny you said it's long, you know, even though it was born a couple months ago, it's life, it's in its short life. But I think, you know, you guys have a burden ahead of you to like figure this out. The one question I have after that is the checks and balance in place, because again, this is inceptual, right? We've just started this new area, and I think I've mentioned this to you before. What is our readjustment and how, like, if you find something that's not working? I know the policy's been already determined, but within that, the framework of that policy, what are you guys going to do in the legal office for this kind of stuff to have agility to kind of fix it if need be?
Yeah.
Well, first, let me say thank you for your kind words, and I'm going to have my parents watch the YouTube version of this later. I truly, this stuff is very important to me, so I appreciate that you recognize that. And yeah, I'm a little moved. I'm a little emo, but so in terms of the charter, adjusting the charter, when we originally drafted it, we did put in that once the committee is established or the program is established, we'll review it every 3 years. But while we are in its infancy, it's up for review every year. That being said, if something came up next month and we needed to adjust the charter, we absolutely would do that. And the charter can be adjusted at any time. The program itself will be adjusted at any time. Currently, if we see a policy and procedure that's not working, we have an ethics and compliance committee. And that committee is made up of, it's multi-divisional. It's made up from managers all across the 15 divisions. And we meet once a month, and that committee has also been broken off to a subcommittee that meets twice a month. And so we are now starting to monitor new and review old policies and procedures that we can adjust as needed.
So that's that's the mechanics for any ad hoc adjustment. We have within the ACRE, you guys have the autonomy to, and then of course, the same process, the loop, which goes to board, for adjustment. So problems identified, discussion, possible solution, briefing of the board, and then decision making, and then yes, that's the mechanics for it.
And the ACRE committee will not necessarily see, and nor will the board see every policy and procedure. We'll report on them, but not every policy is a board policy or an ACRE that needs to be approved by the board. But if let's say there is a board policy that impacts the organization, which most of them do, but the dress code policy doesn't necessarily. So you might not hear about that, but we might tell you the dress code policy was updated and here's what the outcome was. If it is absolutely a mission critical policy, you will, one, be voting on any updates to it, and then two, you'll hear about implementation of it. The most important thing we can do right now is we need to get the structure in place, and then that needs to be done. Then we conduct the risk assessments, because if we conduct risk assessments and the structure is not in place, we're going to know about a bunch of risks, and we're not going to have all the people in place to fix those risks. So it's structure, risk assessments, and then once those risk assessments show us where our gaps are, we can put the controls in place, whether it's more policies and procedures, training, and things of that nature.
Gotcha. Outstanding. That's the OODA loop, to use another airline reference, right? The observe, orientate, decide, and act. So fantastic work. You guys got your work ahead of you. I have total confidence you guys are going to knock it out of the park. So
thank you, Trustee.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I have a comment, and I think so does Trustee Mee. This was amazing, and I think we just get buried in all the bureaucratic stuff, and I should know because I've been in the bureaucracy for probably 40 years. And people need stories. People remember stories. So like 25 years ago, one department had said to me, you need to tell a story. Otherwise, people are not going to digest it. And that's exactly what you do. You selected a very compelling story about how it could affect us personally as the audit committee. And I really appreciate that, and looking forward to working more closely with you, because you really are an out of the box thinker, and I appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Mee for comment.
Thank you, Ms.
So I want to say storytelling, it is powerful thing to do. And it is a good reminder for our boards, right? Don't be like Bowen board, right? So every one of us on our two boards on committee, every trustee, the moment we'll accept the seat, we'll accept the responsibility to all our members. Minor update on the members. Today we have about, I believe it's 196,000 members, not 180.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have 196,000 members and their families relying on every single one of us trustees sitting on the board to protect their benefits and provide, their, financial stability when they retire, right? So that's a great responsibility that we accept it. So it's a good reminder that we need to do our very best. It's the honorable work that we do here. We need to do our best to for the fiduciary duty that we owe to our members. And remember, we only have fiduciary duty to our members and members only, not anyone else. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Mee. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rice to discuss the significant risk of culture, but I think before that, do we want to take a break? Or do you want to power through? Chairman.
Let's take a 10-minute break. That won't hurt us. So we'll come back at 10:45. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
You got the floor, Mr. Rice.
All right. Good morning again, Chair Martin and trustees. I'm going to talk about culture and values. Next slide, please. Culture and values may appear to be vague concepts that are hard to measure and enforce. However, the stakes associated with culture and values are high, and they overlay all the risk management activities that this committee oversees: internal audit, ethics and compliance, and coming enterprise risk management. If organizational behavior does not align with LACERA's ethical culture and values, there is a greater risk of non-compliance with applicable laws, policies, and processes. Culture is shown in behavior. It's not what LACERA says or writes in a policy that ultimately determines whether a control is effective. What matters is what those in the organization actually do, particularly whether leadership sets an example and show by their conduct that values are important. Federal inspectors general recognize this connection, and therefore they focus heavily on the role played by culture and values in their investigations and prosecutions. Attention to culture and values is also recognized as a best practice in audit and compliance guidelines, such as the Institute of Internal Auditors Standards and U.S. Sentencing Guidelines. The ACRE Committee oversees LACERA's organizational risk and compliance, and therefore the committee should be very concerned with culture and risk. Culture and risk really is one of those, it's not really a new area, but to this committee, I think it's more of a new area that hasn't received the focus it needs. And so this follows along exactly with what Trustee Martin was getting at in her questions about making sure we're staying on top of all risks that could affect the organization, and culture and values are big ones. This presentation will make these concepts more complete and actionable for the committee. Next slide. Wells Fargo is an example of the risk and serious consequences that can happen when an organization fails to pay attention to its culture and values. Wells Fargo's management at the top said the right things. The corporate vision was to do the right thing in the right way. This vision expressed a recognition that behavior, not just word, defines counsel. So they got that vision just right. However, there was a disconnect between this great vision, the company's stated vision, and its actual practices. The company sent incentives for high sales goals that resulted in significant pressure on employees to achieve them at any cost. Pressure is often a factor in causing a mismatch between behavior and organizational values. In reality, the culture in Wells Fargo's branch offices was a high-pressure sales culture, not a culture of doing the right thing the right way. Another factor was that management was decentralized, with deference given to business units. Senior management focused on sales metrics, not the practices used to achieve them. Senior management distanced themselves from the culture on the ground and did not set an example or provide adequate scrutiny. Perhaps the most important problem, though, was that the board of directors, while they were aware of sales issues, it relied on management reports that explained the problem away, and the board didn't perform its fiduciary duty to monitor and question those reports. Next slide. The ACRE Committee has oversight of LACERA's internal controls. This is stated in the committee charter and in the approved internal audit and ethics and compliance charters. The rest of this presentation will have two parts. First, the importance of culture and values to LACERA's success and as an organization. And second, a roadmap for how the ACRE Committee should apply them in 5 core areas of its responsibilities. The message of this last section is that this committee has the power and responsibility to assess and address organizational culture and values through monitoring, questioning, and accountability, and apply the thought and innovation necessary to do that. Next slide. What are controls? We talk about controls that we have to manage risk, but controls are the actions by management, the board, and managers and supervisors within the organization to manage risk in achieving LACERA's goals. Examples are policies, procedures, the Code of Ethical Conduct, LACERA's board-approved values, and various processes and practices throughout the organization. These controls are intended to document the requirement for compliance with the laws, regulations, and best practices applicable to LACERA's business. Controls don't operate in a vacuum, though. In other words, just writing down or speaking about a policy or process doesn't mean that it will be followed. Controls operate within the environment that exists in an organization, and these environmental organizations that affect compliance and ethics is called the control environment. LACERA's culture and values are part of LACERA's control environment. If we have a culture of integrity and values, if we have an ethical tone in the organization where doing the right thing the right way is prioritized and recognized with a deep structure to support that that's happening, and if we have standards of accountability for conduct at all levels of the organization that is consistent with our values, LACERA will have a stronger culture and more effective controls. Going back to the quote on the first slide from a former Inspector General, the effectiveness and controls cannot rise above the culture of integrity and ethics and the values of the people who create, administer, monitor, and perform them. And that's true of LACERA. Next slide. At LACERA, our organizational culture is the shared norms, values, beliefs, and ethical behaviors and practices that guide the exercise of ethical judgment and are communicated and modeled by management, the boards, managers, supervisors, and all staff in their daily work. Our culture is measured by LACERA's effectiveness in performing its mission for members and beneficiaries, and evidence that our work is consistent with LACERA's values. LACERA's values are, these are board approved, integrity, inclusivity, innovation, accountability, collaboration, and transparency. We refer to these values as I-ACT, which is an abbreviation based on the first name of each value. And we use this acronym because these values were prepared to emphasize that our values should drive behavior. They're not mere descriptors or mere vague concepts. They describe the behavior that we want to see in the organization. What I-ACT means is that we, all of us, act in accordance with LACERA's core values. Everyone at LACERA should know the values, what they mean, and act accordingly. And we should use the values in everyday discussion about our work and expectations for how we perform it. And that means that we should use the values in everyday discussion at this committee. LACERA's values should define its culture. Next slide. This slide shows research supporting the theme that culture is driven by behavior. It makes sense that if the organization is saying one thing in its values, policies, and procedures, but their leaders, managers, supervisors, or other colleagues at any level of the organization behave differently in practice, or promote, recognize, or reward those who are non-compliant, people in the organization will be more likely to do what they see being done rather than what's written on a document or simply said. If I'm in my office trying to follow a policy and I see the person in the office next to me doing something different and they're doing it, they're getting recognition for doing that, even if it's non-compliant, human nature does suggest that I'm going to lean towards what's working for my colleague instead of going back to the core values and principles of the organization. Research supports this conclusion. Up to 60% of the variation in cultural experience in an organization is explained by what members of the organization do rather than what is said or written. This is a theme that comes out consistently in the social science research about behavior in organizations. An additional 10% is attributable to a strong ethics and compliance program, and that balance, 60% of variation in culture is what members of the organization do. 10% is strong ethics and compliance program. Just emphasizes we need an ethics and compliance program, but what the ethics and compliance program needs to do in partnership with this committee is to make sure that what is done is in alignment with our values. LACERA's goal is that culture aligns with values and is seen in the behavior of trustees, management, and staff. And the ACRE Committee plays a major role in making this goal a reality because of its oversight of LACERA's control environment, including culture and values. Next slide. The practical effect is that organizations with strong culture and values do better. Research shows that strong culture leads to greater customer and member satisfaction, a better experience for customers and members, greater employee loyalty and retention, more innovation and continuous process improvement, and better adaptability to change. Strong culture also leads to improved performance by individuals, and importantly, it leads to even improvement to an even greater extent by staff who are working in teams. So there's kind of a multiplier effect of strong culture when people are working in teams, not just individually. Strong culture leads to staff who are more engaged and give more discretionary effort. Strong culture also leads to a significant increase in reporting of misconduct, lower fear of retaliation, and greater compliance. LACERA strives to achieve all of these benefits. Next slide. Turning to the second part of the presentation, which is the relevance of culture and values in the day-to-day roles and responsibilities of the ACRE Committee, they are relevant to all of the committee's core responsibilities, and we break these down into the 5 categories that are on this slide. First, the committee should understand that culture and values are LACERA's part of LACERA's overall control environment, and that the ACRE Committee oversees culture and values. Once that's foundational. If you have that understanding, it'll be easier to take the additional steps that are listed here. All of you should know the values, the 6 values, and they've come to roll off staff's tongue, and they should really roll off of yours as well. Second, the committee should model LACERA's culture and values. Third, because it is part of the control environment, the committee should see culture and values as a relevant consideration in all audits, investigations, consulting engagement, reports, findings, and recommendations that are brought to you for discussion and action by internal audit and also by the Ethics and Compliance Office, and in every management response. If culture and values are absent or not included, the committee should ask why and consider whether culture and values are a factor in explaining particular control issues that are reflected in a report. Fourth, culture and values should be part of the committee's accountability and evaluation of the internal audit program and the chief audit executive and the chief ethics and compliance officer. And finally, culture and values should be operationalized by the committee through measurement and key performance indicators. I'll now go deeper into each of those areas. Next slide. As Allison discussed, LACERA, its management boards, this committee, and individual trustees can have liability if they do not perform their fiduciary duty of oversight of culture and values as part of LACERA's control environment. The committee should perform this responsibility by following a framework for its oversight of internal controls, and a framework recognized as a best practice is shown on this slide. The first step in the framework at the top of the wheel is defining and assessing the control environment, which includes culture and values. The committee should consider what are LACERA's culture and values and what is their role as part of the control environment. Culture can be local as well as at the organizational level. In other words, there could be a different culture in one division or one section of a division than in other parts of the organization. So how does culture vary in different units of the business? How are culture and values incentivized and reinforced by the organization? How are they tested? Other elements in the framework that's shown here, moving clockwise, are risk assessment, including assessment of the risk that culture and values play in all aspects of the organization's work. Review of the control activities in place to meet the organization's risks. Training and communication about controls within the organization to strengthen awareness and compliance. And ongoing monitoring and questioning by the committee, boards, and management about the effectiveness of the controls, all of which feed back to the top of the circle on an ongoing basis with a refreshed review of the control environment. The U.S. sentencing guidelines includes evaluation of culture and values in every element of a best practice ethics and compliance program. The benefits of the sentencing guidelines promised mitigation or reduction of penalties is afforded only to organizations whose governing bodies and governing officials act in accordance with this practice, including oversight of culture and values. Next slide. Because tone at the top matters a lot, the ACRE committee itself and each member has a responsibility to model LACERA's ethical culture and values. This expectation of committee conduct is already spelled out as a principle in the ACRE committee's approved charter, which in turn is based on the IIA's modeled audit committee charter provisions. The sentencing guidelines and DOJ guidance also provide that prosecutors examine the extent to which senior leaders have demonstrated, quote, rigorous adherence by example to the organization's ethical standards. This tone at the top was missing in the action of the Wells Fargo board and senior management, which in turn led directly to the crisis that it experienced, which cost that company over $3 billion in the end. We want to avoid that sort of situation. Next slide. Oversight of culture and values requires humility on the part of the committee and other LACERA leadership because research shows that leadership often has a much rosier view of culture and values than frontline employees. This type of disconnect is what happened at Wells Fargo because Wells Fargo board and management ignored the company's vision to do the right thing. They assumed it was happening and turned a blind eye to the concerns it heard about the company's sales practices and branch offices. So the ACRE committee, in performing your responsibilities, should model LACERA's values through your personal conduct and during meetings in your preparation, active engagement and discussion, and the accountability to which you hold yourselves, management, and the organization. The committee also models LACERA's values by applying a critical eye to all that is presented to you and by actively monitoring and questioning the potential role of culture and values in audit and compliance findings and recommendations and in management's responses. Next slide. I'll talk about the next two slides together. One relates to culture and values, internal audits work and reporting, and the other relates to ethics and compliance work and reporting, but they're parallel. The internal audit and ethics compliance program charters, as well as best practices, require that the scope of work of every report presented to the committee, as well as the committee's own discussion and actions, should include evaluation of, quote, whether LACERA's ethics and compliance are upheld. So this is a requirement that the committee and the boards have already approved. This is important because it is not sufficient to merely identify whether the organization has performed consistently or inconsistently with a policy, process, or control. That's really the beginning of this discussion, not the end. Control success and control discrepancies are a byproduct of culture and values in the control environment. And therefore, the committee should expect that the memos and reports presented to you show that culture and values have been actively considered. For example, a control failure could be caused by a lack of a policy or process or an ineffective, incomplete, or poorly written policy, which is that would be a very, very simple finding. However, that failure to have a policy or the ineffectiveness of a policy, the root cause could be poor values among staff performing the function at issue, where, again, for example, there are issues of integrity, there is no accountability for poor performance, there has been no training or inadequate training, there is ineffective collaboration, or there is poor leadership. All these could be happening in the local environment where a control is being implemented, and if they're not working, those value concepts are not working, that could be the cause of the control lapse the findings of ineffective controls, and the committee should be looking at that. On the other hand, if an audit or investigation shows compliance, that controls are working, the report should still identify, recognize, and encourage the positive cultural factors that led a policy or other control to be effective and to be followed in the local environment where it's being implemented. Cultural and values-based factors should be investigated and findings reported to the committee and the executive office in a timely and appropriate way by internal audit and by ethics and compliance, and they should also obviously be reported to you. You should expect that internal audit and ethics and compliance staff will provide specific analysis and make specific findings and recommendations as to the role of ethical culture and values. Similarly, you should also expect that management will actively address culture and values in its response to findings and recommendations and its plan for addressing audit or compliance findings and recommendations. The committee should have a specific discussion about culture and values relevant to audits and investigations. The committee should actively question staff and management about issues of culture and values. This active engagement is expected under the sentencing guidelines and other best practices in order for the committee to fulfill its fiduciary responsibilities for oversight of LACERA's control environment. If we could skip ahead to slide 15, please. The internal audit and ethics and compliance program charters require that the committee hold the chief audit executive and the chief ethics and compliance officer in their programs accountable for their effectiveness in encouraging and promoting an ethics-based culture. Applicable standards include that the CAE and CECO model, quote, uncompromising ethics. This is a standard for evaluation that the committee and the boards have already set. The work of the internal audit and ethics and compliance offices should also model culture and values. The ACRE Committee's evaluation of the CAE, the CECO, and the program should include criteria related to their effectiveness in consistently analyzing, evaluating, and making recommendations concerning culture and values. The committee's role as an evaluator of the internal audit and compliance programs and their leadership, the CAE and the CECO, is an important control in promoting a strong ethical culture and consistent with LACERA's values. Next slide. Development of cultural measurement tools and key performance and values-based indicators will enhance the committee's ability to monitor culture and values and make those maybe seemingly vague concepts actionable and monitorable and manageable by the committee. The committee should expect that audit and compliance staff will evaluate and provide measurement and performance data. Culture and values are somewhat intangible, so they are generally measured indirectly through behavioral metrics. Some of these measures are available now. Others will be developed by the CECO working with internal audit. Examples of the metrics and key performance indicators that should be presented to you include employee survey results, which can cover employee perception of ethical behavior, fear of retaliation, comfort in reporting, misconduct and confidence in the investigatory process, understanding of policies and procedures and where to go for questions, does process match policies, and their level of trust in leaders, management, supervisors, and management. All of these are indicators of culture and values because they show the perception of employees of their control environment and therefore will be a strong indicator of whether they are or feel able to act consistent with culture and values. Compliance metrics are important, such as control deviations among the different areas in the organization, material versus non-material deviations, time required to remediate problems, and timeliness of policy review within the specified review cycle. Whistleblower data is powerful. We already have some of this, including data on the use of the ethics hotline, issues reported, founded versus unfounded claims, time taken to conduct investigations, and time for follow-up on recommendations. Employee turnover metrics go to employee satisfaction, which is a proxy for culture and values, including turnover rate by position and reasons for turnover. Training and development metrics go to the communication on culture and values, including the rate of policy attestation and completion of training. In addition to those KPIs, it's also important to collect additional qualitative data from staff surveys, focus groups, and exit interviews of departing employees. Over time, as more data is collected, internal controls, internal points of comparison, and changes over time will be generated so that you can begin to internally benchmark the data you're receiving. And third-party benchmarking data on culture and values is also available. Next slide. To sum up, the effort to bring culture and values into the business of the ACRE Committee will be an ongoing project, but it can begin now. It can start now with the committee members asking questions about the role of culture and values in individual audits, investigations, and reports presented to you. It can start now in terms of just focusing on those 6 values and so that they hopefully roll off your tongue, which will then facilitate the monitoring and questioning. The committee should expect work plans, even in the near future, from audit and ethics and compliance that address investigation and assessment of the risk associated with LACERA's culture and values. That completes my presentation. I'm happy to stand for questions and comments. Otherwise, I'll hand the next item over to Mr. Bendel.
I have a comment. I think this was super duper important. I remember Wells Fargo. I had a girlfriend that was going through that. So yeah, the whole sales pressure and the fact that management was focusing in the wrong area. Values and culture are so important, but we never think about how that affects audit findings or data sometimes. And I think that you bringing this to our attention is great. I've actually listed a little, like a 1 sentence from each of you that we have a takeaway as a group. And I just appreciated the fact that you're being open and honest and wanting us to review LACERA from all levels. And I appreciate that very much. And I appreciate that your management is open to that. That is a super duper big plus here. And the training, this quick training has been amazing. So that's all I have to say. If somebody else wants to jump in, they can.
I have some comments. I echo the sentiment that this is really good. You know, I can't say enough how important this is for orientation, especially since we've made some adjustments in the structure of audit in general and incorporating these other areas. We talk about this culture here, and this is, I've mentioned the deviation of normalcy, right? And if you guys aren't familiar with that, it's just where wrong behavior or deviant behavior, ignoring current policy, laws, rules, internal, even moral things. It's done so much that in an entity that it becomes accepted because it's so routine, and it becomes normal. That's what happens. And it always can lead to a culture where bad practices become the norm, and then aviation or finance, when, Mr. Rice, you brought up the example of the person in the next cubicle doing something and getting away with it, and it works for him every time. And so then, Billy next door decides to go ahead and try it out too. And then everybody's doing it, and then come to find out it's illegal. And the risk in that, all deviation of normalcy results in accidents, failures, and potentially serious consequences, and in this, it could be, everything from liability through civil litigation or even being fined, right? So a couple things, as far as culture, just that disconnect between the perception of management that things are working And, leadership typically is, people work for leaders either through intimidation or rules or laws, I don't want to get in trouble, or they work out of respect for the system and the leaders. And I think, one of the things I'd like this board to possibly consider is when we're trying to develop a strong culture of ethics, that, before it gets to something punitive, that this company and this board explore in context of this, other options, including conflict resolution mediation. I know you've identified some of them, Mr. Rice, as far as education and stuff like that. But preemptively, education, so that everybody understands, what could happen if, a rule is broken, if something, someone wrote a bad check or something like that. But as far as internally, it is a hard thing to define. You mentioned the behavior side of it, and we need to have people feel comfortable and confident to come to work, that it's a safe workspace, and just that's just an idea. Incorporate some type of conflict. And I don't know if Carly's still here for human resources, but if that's already in place, that's great. But conflict resolution mediation, it's less expensive than the discipline process, and it usually ends up being very successful. So. You guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to expand on that, but.
Okay, are we ready to move then to the next area?
Yep. Thank you for the comments, and we've made note of them.
I believe Miss Me has a question.
Oh, sorry, missed her.
Miss Me, not Mr. Me. A couple quick comment here. Definitely, it remind me of one thing that I heard really recently, if I remember correctly. So in the organization, culture is being defined by the worst behavior that being tolerated. So that behavior define our culture. It's the same idea there. Trustee Martin and I went to the audit committee training in the Harvard Business School. So one takeaway I got from that training is that when the organization help, ourselves in the higher standards of ethics and cultures, then we can avoid a lot of unforeseen risks. So that's the goal here. We carry ourselves in the higher standards, and then we can prevent the risk that we didn't even know is coming is there. So last thing is, I have a minor question about the HR process. I'm curious about when turnover happen to employee, do we have an exit interview currently? Just to understand, sometimes when you ask people to fill out forms of why you leave, the reason, they might say they might not, but if you conduct an interview, and you can discover a lot. Just curious about current process if we have that exit interview.
Yes, that's an excellent question, Trustee Mead. We do. We have two forms. One, an actual interview, and then a second, a questionnaire. Anonymous questionnaire can be returned by mail.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Do we have access to that, Carly?
As trustees, no, we do not report out on that currently to trustees.
I know you don't, but it seems like it was in Mr. Rice's presentation about values, the cultural values, but yeah.
We wouldn't want to give you information on individual employees because the CEO is the appointing authority of employees, and he has the responsibility for dealing with those issues. However, what I was suggesting and is done in organizations is to utilize that data and potentially even reporting it in terms of lessons learned, categories of types of comments that are made not on an individual basis, but over a pool of departed employees.
And I think that would be something relevant, and that could help us. So if somebody could put that together for our next quarterly meeting, if that's appropriate, Mr. Rice, that would be great.
Okay, we'll discuss that with Dr. Ntoya.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I was trying to get to a question to human resource to Carly or Laura. Do we have facilities for staff for conflict resolution mediation?
Good one.
So not currently. So as a part of the grievance process, the outcome of a grievance process may escalate to mediation. Outside of a grievance process, and maybe even with disciplinary action, the grievance process is not a part of our progressive discipline model that we follow.
So that would be something. I guess that. Sorry for my long-winded dissertation, but that's kind of where I was going with this, as far as trying to identify the burden of defining culture and a good, safe place to work. I'm referring to a process outside of it, non-punitive, kind of preemptively, like to instill confidence in employees that if there is conflict, personality conflict, again, independent from the culture of following, existing policy, procedures, and laws dealing with investment and other areas, but more in that hard to define human factor. And if there's, outside of the discipline process in a non-punitive way, is there something that you guys have entertained the idea? And if not, would you consider, a non-punitive, like, mediation process that could possibly prevent further escalation that would have to become punitive?
It looks like Laura might want to address that. No, Laura?
Thank you, Chair Martin, and Mr. Green, Trustee Green. I appreciate the question. While LACERA doesn't have like a formal program, I think, which is maybe what you're proposing, Trustee Green, we do make every effort to resolve issues. Interpersonal issues are one of those areas that can sometimes end up in a place you don't want them to go. We really do encourage leaders to talk with their staff about what's going on, raise issues. Management supports this through skip level meetings. So sometimes when those are opportunities for us to kind of hear directly from staff about issues that may be coming up, and helps us intervene in a way to prevent things. So we have a number of things that we do to try to de-escalate tense situations. We also have training we provide, sometimes to whole groups and sometimes to just individuals, but how to have difficult conversations, for example. These are great ways so that when you can kind of maintain that open communication, that transparency, that safe space, it's about solving a problem, not placing blame. Those are ways I think that we address your concerns more informally, ad hoc. I'd be happy to chat with you, and Dr. Ntoya and I would be happy to chat with you offline, maybe about a little bit more about what you are thinking about in terms of a more programmatic approach. I know the fire department has different issues. It's, you folks live together and have to get real good about getting along. So I'm sure you have a lot of experience with that, but that's, I think it looks like Mr. Lugo would like to say something. So.
Laura, just real quick on that, there has been great success with that. Not only does it, the time frame associated around, two people yelling at each other, for example, or having a disagreement that gets a little heated. If it's something that's within that relationship, there's been great success with this. If there's certified conflict mediation, one of them came from the sheriff's department, trained in mediation, and there's been great success. The cost savings and the the emotional cost to the employees also is a huge value. Instead of, going through this entire discipline investigation process, pay this mediator one thing. So I think that it's something to look at. There's value at it. If this is the forum for it at this ACRE committee, if this falls under the umbrella of this, I think it's something to look at. And I know you talked about it as ad hoc, and I don't want to diminish the efforts that you guys have done, but more of kind of a robust, almost not necessarily a policy, but maybe as just another tool in the toolbox that's defined.
I think that there's great. We never want to discipline employees, right? Most people want to do a good job, and I think it is important for us to help them remove barriers to that, which sometimes are interpersonal conflicts. So I think that that's a great suggestion of putting that in our toolbox, particularly when we know that there's an issue between individuals. We certainly don't want to wait till there's a disciplinary action, right? These are all kinds of mediation is one way that we could try to resolve that outside of like the formal mediation that Dr. Ntoye was talking about. And I think I can see Mr. Lugo.
I would like to count. Yeah, go ahead.
No, thank you. And Trustee Green, good question. I think one of our strategic pillars is investing in people, and we want to reimagine our training and development program. And part of that, in conjunction with HR and the employee organizational development team, is looking at different aspects, not only the development of our team, our staff, but also to your point, some of the soft skill training. So whether it's crucial conversations, whether it's kind of a bank and a library of training programs that we could put together that'll better assist our team members around just the interactions that they have on a day-to-day basis, not only with each other, but also with the people we serve, our members. So that's part of kind of a long-term strategic initiative over the next 12 to 24 months, is really building out our training and development program throughout the organizations and at all levels of the organization. So we'll certainly heed that in terms of some of those soft skill, proactive trainings that we can offer our staff.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thanks for entertaining this, because we're talking about the human factor, right? And Mr. Rice talked about metrics and, compliance issues, federally, state, the governing documents that maintain our rules, our box that we have to operate in, and then the metrics that come back from that. If someone, pushes the wrong button or, fudges paperwork or something, I mean, those are metrics that can be, I think, can be fixed by, proper education, everything else. But this other human factor of commingling and whatnot, that's kind of that's the tough one. And it's hard to, and I do think there's value in it as far as, making people that slide where it shows the perception of management versus the perception of employees of how things are going. I believe that would kind of equalize that a little bit in giving people the confidence, because we know there's necessary systems, right, in place that are important as far as equity and inclusion and stuff like that. And they need to be there, but we also have to have, people feel comfortable to speak up and have a venue and know this, initially, if you see something, say something, and also changing the culture of having internal dialogue, like, hey, don't talk to me that way. Something like that, knowing that, trying to work it out with each other too. So thanks for addressing it. And I look forward to any updates on it.
A couple of additional concepts here. I think you can hear from the answer there. This is a area where maybe we need to do some additional work, but we're doing a lot already. And ideally, issues are dealt with at the lowest level possible so that they don't boil up into a real problem. And that's the skill of talent management. And so if we have supervisors, managers, other leaders who are trained to identify these issues and are successful in identifying these issues of relational issues, performance issues through just their day-to-day management, but also through the performance evaluation process. These things can be mitigated. Second comment is you mentioned Speak Up, and I was going to mention our Speak Up program, which is really what we now call our hotline program, because we've really broadened it to be a larger venue for the expression of concerns, which again allows it's another escape valve for the release of pressure by individuals, even anonymously, if they want to get things off their chest.
Well, he was right. And the last thing I have for Mr. Bindle, like this, this proposal, as far as your staff with, is it something that could be folded in as far as evaluation under audit for compliance? Would it be too burdensome?
Oh, no. As Mr. Rice discussed in his presentation, that is something that we need to consider in all of the audit work we do. Is what are the underlying ethical, cultural, underlying causes sometimes that might be relating to some of the problems, the issues found during the audits, or management's attentiveness to improvements or non-attentiveness to improvements, whether that may be as well. So culture is critical to the audit process.
Excellent. Well, Mr. Lugo, I look forward to your analysis and what you guys land on in the future. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. That was great conversation. I think this has kind of opened up a little area that I think we're all going to need to talk about a little more, because I don't feel like we've really looked into, the values and the foundation and all that for that. So I know we will work together as a group to start incorporating that. So that'll be great. With that, I will turn it over. No more questions? Then Mr. Bendel has the floor.
I was dreading following Ms. Collins, Ms. Barrett, and Mr. Rice with those great presentations, but I've got a reprieve because our external auditors, I believe, need to have a plane to catch. So we're going to take out of order, and Mr. Granger is going to come up and introduce them.
Right. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, Chair Martin and ACRE Committee trustees. My name is Ted Granger. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at LACERA. I was asked and I'm excited to introduce a team of auditors up here with me. And I will also provide a couple of quick opening comments. So immediately to my left is Brent Bannister. He's a Chief Actuary with Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting. They are LACERA's reviewing or quote audit actuaries. And I'll let Brent get into some of the details of what that means in a moment. And on the other side of Brent is Kristen Hunt. She is a partner with Plant Moran. She is LACERA's audit partner as far as the annual financial statement audit is concerned. And next to Kristen is Amanda Kronk. She is a principal with Plant Moran, and she is the audit manager for the engagement. So I'd like to take a couple of minutes just to highlight the critical role me and my team plays in strengthening our organization's adherence to the 3 lines of defense model, which Richard talked about earlier, and it's been referenced in other presentations today. It may sound like a repeat, but this is a very, very important model in the audit world and the compliance world. The first line of defense, Ted defines it as managing risk and implementing internal controls. Richard talked about the doers or the team, essentially management. One quick example, the CFO helps mitigate risks at the operational level by overseeing financial reporting and compliance. So 2 things there to note. My team in accounting, we prepare LACERA's annual financial statements. We have a team of about 15 people. We go through a very deliberative process. It takes us about 6 months. We rely on our internal experts, for example, legal office, investment team, to help us prepare those statements. But again, this is a very significant and internal management operation that we perform. Another sort of management operation we do is my team oversees the actuarial valuation reporting process. And what we do there is we oversee the expert consultant to prepare those reports. We have timelines. We have a staff cover memo where we go through the information and try to summarize it for the trustees. And we also talk to the actuaries about making sure they're implementing and adopting the latest ASOPs. So again, managing risk, implementing controls, and preparing this internal management information and reports. Second line of defense, I define that as accurate financial data and compliance with SERL, GAAP, GASB. Richard referred to this as the referees. One example there in terms of, from my perspective, is the CFO helps ensuring that our policies and procedures are aligned with regulatory requirements. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Each year, GASB, seems like it's every year, GASB issues new financial statement reporting standards. LACERA prepares our financial statements in accordance with those standards. My team goes through a very deliberative, thorough process of reviewing those standards, trying to determine which standards apply to LACERA. If and when they do, we have a whole second stream of work that we have to complete. So for example, we get training on the new standard. We would prepare financial data, schedules. We would also prepare narratives. We would, again, confer with our internal experts, like maybe our investment folks, maybe our legal folks, maybe it spills over into a benefits type situation. And so we put that information together. We do provide it to Plant Moran as sort of a preliminary look over to see if we're missing anything. And then it goes into our financial statements. It becomes part of our part of the audit process and part of the financial statement review process. So again, second line of defense, trying to comply with the appropriate standards. And finally, the third line of defense, this is the audit part, internal audits, external audits. This committee, we believe that we effectively collaborate and participate in this process. This includes the risk assessment process. Internal audit does that every year. We also go through a risk assessment process with Plant Moran. And of course, the audit process itself, which I think is the second step. We're active participants. We welcome audits. Not that necessarily we love audits, but we do welcome audits, and we know they're necessary to the organization's operations. We feel like we're constantly being audited, but that's fine. We're used to that. And finally, an important element that is always addressed by internal audit is recommendation follow-up. Again, not one of my favorite things, but a super critical, important process. We always have internal auditors bugging us about the recommendations and what we're doing to implement them and report them, and they will report them back to this committee. So again, necessary process that we participate in. And finally, we believe that we've developed sort of a good working relationship with the auditors. We understand what their role is in the organization. We think what our role is in the organization as a management team in terms of doing our work and preparing this information. And I'll kind of go back to sort of that first line of defense. We feel like the management team here at LACERA is responsible for managing risks, implementing internal controls, and achieving our strategic objectives. The second part of that is the auditors and the audit team. And so with that, I just wanted to give you kind of an update and kind of an overview of what we do on the management side. And then I'm going to hand it over to the auditors and let them talk about what they do on the audit side. So I don't know if there's any questions for me, but if not, I will hand it over to Kristen.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Ted. Can we move the slides? Advance them to right there, the agenda. Thank you. So Amanda and I are here today to just reinforce some of the items that Ted had mentioned as well. We were able to visit with you back in December, as you probably remember, to go over the financial statement results for the June 30th, 2024 year. First, just to go over our agenda briefly, we're going to talk to you about your required reporting, and then we'll also spend a little bit of time doing a little bit deeper dive on your financial statement risks that we identify as part of your audit and how we address those. We want to leave a little bit of time for questions, and then we want to leave you with some additional resources that you can have some additional thought leadership as your audit firm for information that you can always have for some extra attention. So if we can go to the next slide. If we talk about your required reporting and why, as Ted mentioned, you have GASB reporting requirements. You also have reporting requirements related to your SURL of advancing those. You also have a reporting requirement related to the county, since it is a component unit of the Los Angeles County. Internal controls are also important. So as a reminder, we do not provide an opinion on your internal controls. No financial statement audit provides an internal control opinion, but we do provide a supplementary internal control letter that provides information about your financial statement internal controls. We review those as part of your audit, as part of our planning process, so that we can properly identify areas of risk and make sure that we have a plan of attack in your audit. So if anything comes to our attention as during our audit of any failures or stop gaps in your internal controls, we would report those to you. Another thing that your audit does, your external audit provides transparency to your members. So as part of your responsibility and your oversight of the audit, providing that information so that you can have that audit report that your members can rely upon really gives you that good report card to have everybody have confidence in the financial statements reporting of the numbers. And lastly, really of accuracy of your internal interim financial statements that you're provided to by your team for review. Really, the fact that those interim financial statements roll up into the annual financial statement information that we review helps give you confidence that those numbers are right. As your auditors, if we identify any significant adjustments that we would have to make to those numbers, we would report those out to you, and those could be a potential audit finding. We have not had that instance. So I think if I was in your shoes sitting there as your board members, understanding that those numbers that get reported to you throughout the year, you can really have confidence in those if your auditors aren't making significant changes to those at the end of the year. So it helps you have some place reliance on that. So then the other two reporting requirements, so we do 3 reports for you. So we do the bulk of that work goes around that large document for the financial statement audit, but we also have these 2 supplementary reports that you need to have your financial reporting for the members of the plan, for the member employers of the plan. Those are called the GASB 68 report, and GASB 68 in accounting terms relates to the pension liabilities, and GASB 7D5 relates to the OPEB. So that's the other post-employment benefits, or the healthcare types of benefits that are provided afterwards. That information gives each of those individual employers the information they need so that they can report those liabilities and the pension expenses and the footnote disclosures within their financial statements to have that information available. When we do your financial statement audit, the first one, it's as a whole. And so these 2 reports really provide that detailed information that those employers need to be able to meet their financial reporting goals that they have requirements under the GASB for themselves. And next, I want to turn it over to Amanda to talk a little bit deeper dive into our audit risks.
Thank you. On the next slide, we're really going to focus on a few different risks for you today. As you remember, in December, we touched briefly on these, but thought it important to go a little bit deeper into those risks. And you heard earlier today a focus on risk assessment, and Kristen just mentioned it as well. We spend a large amount of time during the planning and really throughout the year risk assessing, and that happens in various forms. Some of it is just discussing with Ted and his team unique transactions throughout the year, or review of board and committee minutes. And long story short, that risk assessment phase really is throughout the year and leading up to our audit. When we meet with you in June, we do highlight risks that we are aware of at the time as it relates to your financial statement audit. And we are required to communicate those risks to you. But again, today, we've boiled down the risks to 2 significant risks that really are there year in and year out. The first of which is investment valuation. So As you're all aware, LACERA holds significant investments, both easier to value investments or those that can be easily valued in the marketplace, and those that are harder to value and perhaps not readily available in the marketplace. As your external auditors, we focus on two perhaps more significant risk areas, and that relates to existence. So what evidence is available to support that that investment really does exist and is not fictitious in nature? And what evidence is available to support the valuation at June 30th of each year? So as you can imagine, those are two very significant areas, and we do a number of things to test those two assertions. And I've bulleted a few of the more significant tests that we perform here for you. So first off, we obtain directly from State Street, which is your custodial record keeper, a download of every single investment that LACERA holds. As you can imagine, it is a very large document, but what that allows us to do is a number of things, which leads into the next bullet there. We analyze the trend of what your balances have done, not necessarily, thinking that's a good or a bad thing, but looking for anomalies. Perhaps a certain set of investments are not acting as we would have expected based on the market, or new investments, as those pose a different risk, and divestment, again, a different risk. So we perform this analysis again in hopes of identifying additional risks or perhaps things that we need to focus on during our audit. As previously mentioned, we review your internal controls surrounding these two particular assertions to ensure that they're operating effectively, and as management and LACERA has designed them to do. And certainly we do perform substantive testing of all different asset classes, both those easy to value ones and certainly those that are harder to value and require more estimation by management. The other significant risk here that we wanted to focus on today is census data and what that means. So census data, just to level set, really is all of the member data for the members of LACERA. And that really could be, that's including demographic information, dates of birth, beneficiaries, all sorts of information is included in this listing. And what that really means for LACERA's financial statements is you're going to hear in a little bit more from CAVMAC on what they do in auditing the valuation, but the census data itself is a key component of estimating what the total plan liabilities are on both the pension and the OPEB. So again, as you can imagine, there's significant risk there if the data is not accurate or the data is incomplete. So again, that's where, from a financial statement perspective, we focus our audit testing. We use technology to perform analytics and help us assess where the data is not acting as we would have thought. So we begin by comparing the current year data to the prior year data and look for, again, data that's not acting how we thought it would. Maybe somebody has 2 additional years of service instead of the 1 we would expect, or maybe dates of birth have changed. Again, something we would not expect to see. And you might think that those are relatively minor items, but if someone's date of birth changes, that then changes their mortality, which then changes, their total estimated liability. So that data analytic that we do right there allows us to hone in on the anomalies in the data and perform detailed testing on those anomalies. We also do substantive testing where we pick a sample of participants and ensure that they're accurate to records maintained by LACERA and the related employer. And we are also testing for completeness. We're selecting a sample from payroll records to ensure that they are appropriately reflected in the census. We also review the assumptions, which again, I will not get too far into the next part of the presentation, but we also review the assumptions and calculations to ensure that they are also accurate, not only in comparison to plan design, but other market data points. So are the returns in line with 20 or 30-year projections, et cetera? So those really that really is a high level of those two risk areas. By no means is that a complete list of the risks related to your financial statements, but those are the two that really are consistent from year to year. As Kristen mentioned real quickly before we move into questions, on slide 8, there are 2 links to a few articles that are available on Plant Moran's website. Actually, slide 7, I'm sorry. That are available directly on Plant Moran's website. We thought they might just be great reads for this team, focusing on cybersecurity risks and certainly AI risks. So I certainly encourage you to take a look at those. But we can open it up to questions if there are any questions for Kristen or myself related to the financial statements.
If there aren't any questions, I'd just like to reinforce too how much we appreciate the good year-round relationship we have with your team, especially with CFO's office and internal audit's office. It's nice that whenever there are something that's new, unusual, perhaps a new accounting standard, or maybe a large or significant unusual transaction, that we're able to talk about that in real time when those happen and work through any of our questions related to those. And if there's any follow-up, that really helps us with this risk assessment process, like Amanda says, to be able to do that, in year round, having some level of communication and being able to be involved in things like this so that we can have a good, familiar relationship to you. As Amanda mentioned, we'll be reporting out to you again as a part of the planning process before the audit gets started there later in the summer, probably in that June meeting that you'll have, and talk a little bit more about the audit plan for the June 30th, 25 year. That also provides you, if you have ever any concerns throughout the year, anything, you don't have to wait until that audit time. If you have something that you'd like to bring to our attention or something you'd like to us to know about to incorporate into our audit, we'd certainly like to hear about that.
I have a comment. Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to get my microphone on. Yes, you guys are always, you've been wonderful partners. I've talked to you, I talked to Larry. I really think your firm does a tremendous job, and what you just walked us through today was really great. I mean, you're taking outside information and you're doing, some sort of analysis on LACERA, then you're pulling samples. I think the whole thing makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that we're fortunate to have you on board, and we're fortunate to have you accessible to us, because it helps, it'll help us make decisions. And we've got outsiders. As you're involved, you're an outside entity. LACERA, we're an outside trustee board. So I think we're covering all the bases there, and just appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're ready to move to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brent Bannister from Kavanaugh McDonald will address the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today and get to visit with you. I guess there was a small tornado possibly here just a few miles away this morning, so I appreciate you trying to make me, as a Nebraska resident, feel at home. So we'll take what we have. Want to cover kind of 4 basic topics here. One is just to talk through what the whole actuarial side of things is, especially from kind of a risk perspective. A little bit of contrast between an actuarial and a financial audit, because actuarial audits are a bit different. And then a little bit about what we do and just kind of for LACERA, and then kind of how we think that's working. So on slide 3, kind of a simple picture here of what we would call the actuarial model. There's a number of things, the data, for instance, that Amanda was just talking about that goes in. And then there's kind of this sort of black box sort of thing that the actuaries do and outcome the results. That actuarial model is not always really transparent to the average person. This is kind of complex, messy stuff. Just, you know, we find it fun, but it's not everybody's cup of tea, and it is very specialized. And so a big portion of what we're trying to do is just help make sure that what goes on in that part of this process is working the way it's supposed to work. It's pretty key, because if you change that model, the outputs can change quite a bit for no other reason than, you know, just how that model is built. So on slide 4 here, just a couple things with that. I mean, one, you know, this whole idea of risk with the retirement system, you've got a number of different things going on, but, you know, bottom line is you want to make sure you're able to make the payments to people on time when they're due. And there's just a number of things that, from an actuarial perspective, just the things that are happening to people and investments and all of that are going on. And that's where we really keep our focus, is assuming everybody's doing their right job, just what are the things that are sort of outside of the realm of what you have control over, how long people live, how investments do, things like that. How does that all fit together? Again, this is something that the boards can't easily look at and say, oh yeah, we those numbers make sense. We do a quick double check. They're complex, but you got to know what's going on. You've got to be comfortable. So that's where the actuarial audit comes in. Billman is your retained actuary. They're doing this work, but we're essentially coming in and looking over their shoulder and not just checking their numbers. Checking their numbers isn't checking the model. It's just checking their calculations. We're running independent models. It's actually completely different. We don't expect to get the same numbers. We get the same numbers. In fact, I start getting nervous. Like, how come we're getting the same number? We shouldn't get the same number if we're really being independent. And then with that, do these models make sense so that there can be some confidence that the measurements that they're coming up with are ones that you can rely on. So slide 5, just kind of some of the work that we do for LACERA on a regular basis. There's 2 broad plans: the retirement plan, which is you know, the bigger one, but the OPEB plan, which is still significant in and of its own right as well. For each of those plans, there are annual actuarial funding valuations that determine what are the funding needs of these plans. How much money needs to go in to make sure we're going to be able to accumulate all the resources over time to pay the benefits when they're due. There are accounting reports that need to be developed. And again, the same GASB reports the auditors are talking about, there's actuarial numbers in there. It's ultimately an accounting report, but it relies on some numbers generated by actuaries. And so, again, we're looking at helping look at those reports. Every 3 years, LACERA conducts an experience study, goes through and says, what are the assumptions we're using? If we look back, are those still good assumptions? Are they reliable, credible? Kind of an important part of the world keeps changing. Are we keeping up? Are we looking ahead? Are we anticipating what's going to happen? And then additionally, we periodically are asked to help with maybe some special project review of something where there's just the desire on the part of LACERA staff for kind of an independent perspective. We don't do an audit of every project every year. There's a rotation on these. I guess we do look at all the experience studies. Those are done every 3 years. We look at about every 3rd valuation and about every other GASB report. So we're kind of varied there. Just, again, monitoring a risk level. If Milliman's model is pretty good this year, it probably can't change dramatically next year. the data might change. That's what the auditors are looking for on the census data. But in terms of did anything change with their kind of perception of the world, that doesn't change year to year. They run the same software each year. That part we feel pretty good about. So we can look at it every few years and still have a pretty good assessment of where we are. On page 6, I just wanted to kind of draw a couple contrasts to the financial versus actuarial audit. Again, the financial audit is probably the one that people think of more, that you just hear about it more. But they're different. In fact, often are calling what we do a review versus an audit, just because it is a little different in nature and trying to help draw that distinction. The financial audit is trying to say, is everything there accurate, complete, everything done the way it is? It also tends to be looking to the past. I mean, accounting inherently looks at what did happen. As actuaries, we do need to think about what did happen, but we're more concerned about what is going to happen, which of course you can't double check and see, what's going to happen 5 years from now. It's not a knowable thing. And so inherently we're needing to bring in some assumptions, some professional judgment, things like that as we try to form this model about what's there in the future. So both of these functions are needed. One looking at what did happen in the past, one looking at what is anticipated in the future. We have a chart on the next page that kind of just, again, sort of summarizes the distinctions here of the various areas. And so you can, again, see that there are some general differences, that we're looking at, again, maybe a bigger picture, a little less detail of did every single I get dotted and T crossed, but more, are the assumptions and the procedures and the thought processes lining up with good professional judgment? Bringing in really an independent view of what the world looks like. Are we lining up there? The one thing you will notice is not there. We don't compare personality, because there's no way we as actuaries are going to try to hold ourselves up and having the same personality as auditors. When it comes to that box, check if you're not a robot or whatever. We always have to stop and think for a second, which way do we do it today? But anyway, there are some differences there in these two audits. Slide 8, just to kind of talk about some of the key things we look at. We look at the census data in a different way from what the auditors look at. They're trying to make sure that the data that gets generated matches what really happened, that the person was really there and really worked and had their actual birthday and all that. What we're trying to make sure is that that data is being used in the right way. Is the way that it ends up flowing through to the calculations Milliman makes, is that appropriate? Are they treating service in the right way? Are they manipulating ages appropriately and all of that? So it's an important thing for us to look at, because again, we can think about it not just simply, hey, is the value in A over here equal to the value of A over here, but is the value of A even needed? Or are they using it the right way, or should they be using B instead? So that's the kind of thing that we try to bring into that particular thing. We actually go through and replicate the valuations, do all the calculations from scratch. We actually, over this next cycle, we'll be using a new valuation software. So we will get kind of an additional enhanced level of review, building a different model, actually potentially a little more sophisticated, just because computing power lets us do that now. But it's a complete calculation, not a double checking, but a building of our own assessment of what the numbers are. And then we go through and look at the GASB reports and just say, are the numbers here being used right? Much of the numbers in the GASB report, they're accounting numbers. They come from the auditors. Those exhibits get dropped in. Everybody can check them and look at them. But there are certain calculations in those GASB reports in particular that an actuary's perspective is pretty important to just say, are these numbers making sense from a forward-looking estimation of the future? Page 9, a couple more things. We look at the experience study. We actually go through and verify many of the numerical results in this. This is a much more detailed audit than typically would occur in an experience study, but it is something that you have done for years. And so we do that. We look at the recommendations, the changes. We consider things, even just the bigger picture, the funding policies, and how are we spreading costs, those kinds of things. Again, Milliman is preparing that information. They're telling you what they think. We're giving it an independent review as a major player in the public plan environment. We're drawing on some different experiences than they are. We're trying to see, do we all think the same way? And then we'll look at the actual reports and make sure that they meet all the actuarial standards of practice, so that we as actuaries say that the report should be. We also just try to think about, is this helping LACERA understand what's going on well? Is there some way it could be better? One of the things I think we appreciate working with Milliman on this is it's a collaborative sort of event. We can go to them and say, hey, have you thought about showing this exhibit this way? Or have you thought about putting this number here and rearranging this? And they're responsive to that. We work together on that. We work together. I say that, but we'd still love, of course, to find a mistake and just say, hey, look, gotcha. So it's not we're working with them. We don't stay objective. We still maintain that objectivity, but we also try to be collaborative to help it improve the process of what comes to LACERA. So kind of some final comments on page 10. The audits we do, again, are our full replication. That's thorough. The experience study is a replication audit. Really what's done is probably almost better than best practice. If people talk about what's best practice for actuarial audits, you're on the cutting edge of that, or maybe even ahead. And I think that gives you as the board kind of that confidence of, we can rely on these numbers. They're pretty key. It's easy to kind of say, well, who knows what those actuarial numbers mean anyway? If what the actuary said, we'll just take them and use them. They're pretty key because everything you do is driven by what are you going to have to pay out in the future. If those future estimates are wrong, you're saving the wrong amount of money. Sure, you're investing it great, but if you're not investing the right amount for the right target date, it's not going to work well for you. So the actuarial numbers are very important, and I think we'd like to think that you should feel good that you're getting good actuarial work. We're able to come in independently. We report to internal audit, not to the finance department. So again, just one more difference from if we find something with what Milliman's doing that we don't like, I can give Richard a call and say, hey, Richard, here's what I see going on, and know that it can be heard directly. So all that to say, I think you can be very confident that you're getting good actuarial work, and it's our job to make sure that you kind of know that it's solid, or to let you know what needs to be changed. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Yeah, I would just add that Milliman, I think, in my assessment, does a very good job at working with CABMAC, and Milliman is also very open to suggestions for improvement, looking at their processes and also updating their reports, either the current report or future reports. So I believe it's a very collaborative process that improves the actual evaluation process at LACERA.
I have a question. When was the last time you did the actuary?
So let's see, the pension report has been 2 years because we're doing it next year.
Okay.
2022 is the pension valuation. That was the triennial cycle for pension 2022, and then again in 2025.
Okay.
So upcoming, as Brent mentioned.
And for OPEC, same thing?
Yeah, so we stagger it on purpose. This is way too much work for us to do all at the same time. So 2023 for OPEB and 2026 for OPEB again.
Sorry, I always say it wrong. 26, got it. Okay. And explain to me the relationship between CABMAC and Milliman.
I'll get started maybe. So they are two separate actuarial consulting firms, completely independent of each other. Milliman is LACERA's actuarial consultant. They're responsible for preparing the reports and working with the two boards to prepare those reports and valuations, to review the assumptions with the boards and trustees and get approval of those assumptions. CAVMAC comes along and I want to say sort of in tandem takes a look at those processes and does their audits or reviews in real time when Milliman's performing that work. So for example, when we start the experience study in October with the Board of Investments, we will notify Brent and CAVMAC and his team. Milliman will start discussing the assumptions with the Board of Investments. CAVMAC will come along and start their work. We'll talk to the board about the economic assumptions, and we'll come back and talk about the demographic assumptions. Brent and his team will start working through with Milliman the materials that are provided, the analysis that was done by Milliman, and then CAVMAC will perform what Brent described. So when we come to the board in December and we ask for approval of the assumptions, we have confidence that CAVMAC has taken a look at those assumptions and the process that Milliman used to prepare those assumptions in accordance with actuarial standards. And that gives the board confidence in what Milliman's recommending, and hopefully gives the trustees confidence in their decision-making that they do.
That's beautiful. I don't know what else to call it, but I mean, wow. I never realized that was happening. It's like they're checking the actuary. And I mean, the safety nets that you have prepared here have been beyond awesome. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I got a technical question. I understand that the actuary audit occurs every 3 years, and maybe this is to Mr. Granger too, but the timing of it, with the triennial and annual assessment, because we have an actuary report every year for the PEPRA members, is that just folded into this triennial audit of actuary, or is there a separate annual audit?
Right, and I'll give it a try. Maybe Brent can supplement my answer from the audit perspective, but the way I understand it works, it is at the 3-year mark. 2 assessments are done. One of the experience study and that process. The second assessment is done of the actual evaluation that's prepared at that 3rd-year mark. So the short answer to your question is no. Annual audits of the evaluation are not done. However, and Brent can describe this much better than Ted, but I believe there's sort of a catch-up process built into the actuarial audit. The actuary and the actuarial auditor are looking at that last 3 years of experience to get us to the point of when we're performing that current year assessment. So it's not disregarded. Those interim 2 years are not disregarded. They're looked at on that as part of that 3rd year process. So if something goes awry, it would most likely be caught at that 3rd year. And then they can also easily go back and trace that back to, well, maybe it happened in that 2nd year, or maybe it happened the 1st year after that last experience study or that last audit.
Yeah, I think, the way I would look at it is actual processes move fairly slow and predictably, that when we do look at that experience study every 3rd year when Milliman does it, those are the assumptions, the methods that get set. We don't really have much concern about them somehow doing something really weird in between. I mean, that's pretty improbable. Results would jump out, people would notice. And so for us to just look at every 3rd valuation that they do, it's still a very high level of review. I mean, most systems are probably looking every 4, 5, 6 years, not every 3 years. So again, you're looking at a very regular interval. And so I think it reduces the risk of something happening that causes problems.
Gotcha. I'm just going, right now we don't have that super majority of post-PEPRA members. And as you know, we're bound by Searle to do that actuary report annually.
Yeah.
And, I just, if there's been dialogue, looking towards the future, that I understand that we are exceeding expectations and what other peers are doing as far as actuary or auditing of actuary findings and whatnot. But with that in mind, is there a chance, as more people fall into this category of having to be looked at annually versus triannually, is there that, like you said, things move very slowly over that 3-year period, but is that opening up us for risk in the future, that if you wait 3 years to catch something could have been missed by Milliman? Or is there a transition period because of our demographic?
Yeah.
I mean, I let me see if I can comment. The actuarial process, as we talked about, is a little bit of a sort of a slow moving process. And the actuaries talk, and Brent mentioned this, a lot about their assumptions, a lot about their predictions of what's going to happen in the future. And, the second year we're using those assumptions, yes, those contribution rates could be slightly off per se, because those assumptions might be slightly off. If Milliman says, let's assume it's a 7% investment portfolio return, and the return has been 9%, okay, that means the contributions might be a different number. But what we've seen based on our history is that those differences haven't been significant, and Milliman can talk more about this maybe in the risk assessment report in June, in terms of their predictions or their assumptions versus their actuals. They do spend a lot of time already talking about this, but I think that when we get to that third year, if we're looking and focusing on those differences and we see huge variations, then we might want to think about doing something in the interim. I don't believe we've run into that over the last, I don't know, I want to say 20-ish years, where we've come to the point where we said, gosh, we were really, really wrong in our predictions, our assumptions. The other thing that I would add, and I think this is in accordance with actuarial standards, is that when Milliman performs that annual evaluation and when Brent's team takes a look at it, the actuarial community and our consultants are required to have a conversation with the board if they think something is awry in that midstream. So, for example, I'll go back to the investment return. That's a big assumption. If Nick at Milliman is seeing 12% investment returns 2 years in a row, and we haven't gotten to the experience study just yet, Nick is required to go to our board of investments and say, hey, we might need to take a look at this and we might need to make an adjustment off cycle. And Nick will do that, and they do make those assessments. So in performing that annual evaluation, they might be seeing some minor deviations over time, but my recollection is that nothing's risen to that point to where things are significantly off.
So Brent and his team is looking at it from an auditing standpoint annually already, right? And like you said, if there's something that is just super unrepresentative of any assumption, that discussion, that the process still happens. But
yeah, we actually only look at it every third year.
Okay.
Now we do look at because we look at the GASB 68 regularly. If something were going really weird, I guess we'd say, boy, these numbers are very different. But I think you would have, everybody internally would have said, hold on, how come the numbers changed so much since last year too? So
gotcha.
Well, before it gets to us, there'd be an awareness. But yeah, we look every third year at the pension, every third year at the OPEB, and in
So
between.
Ted, you're saying the checks and balances is if something in that actuary assumption model gets going, then it'll trigger some type of intervention. It's in place. And then it's validated on that third year by Brent and his team.
Right. Yeah, especially to whether we expect that to continue in the future. I mean, for instance, if you had a very large pay increase come through, kind of some adjustments to pay and say, hey, we've had some higher inflation recently, let's give everybody a big pay raise. It's going to make a difference in the next year valuation. It's going to suddenly jump up. That's what happened past. The question would come up, is this going to continue? Well, no, we don't think it's going to continue. We think that was a catch up for an unusual situation. And so we won't factor that in the future. Or no, we think this is the new reality. We will factor it in. That's the every 3-year study that we're looking at is, have the events of the past few years caused us to change our view of the world in the future?
Gotcha. All right. Thanks. Ted, anything else on that? I appreciate the time on it.
Yeah, I would just comment that we have to have some reliance on our professional consultants. In this example, Milliman performing the work and adhering to the standards and their experience and knowledge with LACERA since about 1997. Milliman's been our consultant. So, and the same with the management team, the same with Ted and his team in terms of preparing the annual financial statements. I think it starts with some reliance and some confidence in the consultants as well as the management team in their work. And I think this audit is that second step or that assurance or reassurance that things are happening appropriately. And in terms of my experience with Milliman, I do have a high level of confidence, and I'm also very grateful that we have Brent coming in at that third year mark. I think it's the right frequency for now, and we can always talk to the Board of Investments about that. And I think Brent might have alluded to that a little bit in his comments about LACERA's sort of very robust process, and other funds are looking at this on a 5 or 6 year cycle. So I guess I'm sitting up here in an audit committee presentation, and I'm about to say that we might want to think about over auditing or over expending our resources. Perhaps we just have to consider what's the right place to put the right resources. And if we determine that it's not frequent enough, we can certainly look into increasing the frequency.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you addressing it, and I absolutely I like Miss Martin, Chair Martin said, our process is robust, and this is the redundancy in here again instills confidence, ensures compliance, and also validates the effort of everybody. And it's not lost on me. I really was I think a point of information question, and I hope you didn't draw that I was alluding to that there's anything lacking. I just was curious about that annual evaluation and if it was prudent, if our demographic changed for sure. So,
and Trustee Green, I think, that is what our job is. We're supposed to always ask why, right?
Yes.
So you did it. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yes, good question.
Okay. Richard, where are we?
Chair Martin, in consideration of time, I'm happy to plow forward, or this presentation might fit in well with my kickoff of the risk assessment process at next month's meeting, as you wish.
Great. That's great. I like the latter. Does anybody else object? There's been a lot of information we've been processing. If you would do that during the next meeting, that would be wonderful.
I could certainly do that.
Okay, cool. So with that,
maybe comments from our audit committee consultant, Mr. Jensen.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I'll see if I can wrap this up here for us.
Thank you.
So we received some excellent training today on the roles and responsibilities of the committee from what I call LACERA's A-team, meaning auditors, accountants, attorneys, and actuaries. And so I'd like to really thank staff for the terrific job that they did in putting this information together, along with Plante Moran and CAVMAC for providing training on the important services that they provide to LACERA and assurances that are given to this committee. As you know, the committee plays a critical role in ensuring the integrity, transparency, and accountability of LACERA's financial and operational processes. And through diligent oversight, risk management, and adherence to ethical and regulatory standards, the committee helps safeguard assets, maintains public trust, supports informed decision-making by the board, and then also protects our members' retirement security. At each meeting, staff provides reports that provide assurances for the committee to fulfill these oversight responsibilities. We had 11 specific responsibilities from internal audit, 13 activities from compliance, and now new emphasis on oversight of culture and values as well. So the role of the committee continues to evolve. But on page 145 of the agenda today, there is a chart that shows the type of documentation that's provided with linkage to the committee charter. And similar to the Wells Fargo example, the committee should question the reports held by management and keep management and staff accountable. So I think you've done an excellent job in asking questions today as well. As committee members, your commitment to effective governance, internal controls, and financial stewardship strengthens the organization's resilience and long-term success. By continuously enhancing your knowledge and remaining vigilant in our responsibilities, you contribute to that culture of accountability and excellence that has been stressed today. The role of the committee continues to evolve, and I look forward to enhancing risk management through the implementation of the Enterprise Risk Management Program this next year, where the committee really can focus on all significant risks that may affect LACERA, along with emerging risks like AI and cybersecurity that were mentioned by Plante Moran. So in conclusion, I'd just like to once again thank staff and the committee for this excellent training that we've received and how critical it is, especially as the committee launches into the new year as a newly formed committee. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Larry, can you explain, because we've got a mix on the board, can you explain what your role is? Because you are our consultant, and it seems to me it's like another layer of, protection. But I think I'd like to hear your definition of what you do for us, so everybody knows.
Well, thank you. Sure. So it's a great opportunity for me to be able to assist the committee in actually ensuring that we're on track and fulfilling those roles and responsibilities. Based on my experience, I also review all of the agenda items that are presented to you and see how those tie to fulfillment of your responsibilities. Also, I work with staff, and sometimes even in this example here, in preparing the presentations to make sure the information is complete and what the things that you need to know. Additionally, I may ask questions of staff during the meetings to make sure that certain points are understood that are relevant to the committee, or that make sure that the committee is informed of certain relevant points. And so, and if the committee has any questions with regards to, there's been a lot talked today about one of your roles is to ensure that internal audit adheres to their internal auditing standards. Well, what is that? What does that mean? And if you have those kind of questions, I can answer those questions for you. I know that Richard could too, but from an independent consultant perspective, I can make sure that if you have any questions about that, to help in those areas. So I think that kind of summarizes the roles and responsibilities of the consultant.
And Bonnie, can you send Larry's contact information to the trustees on the board? Thank you. Anybody have any more questions? It's been a long day, a great day.
I make a quick comment, Chair Martin?
Yes, go. Yeah.
I appreciate the training today a lot, every single one, the presentation. So I have a minor suggestion. Maybe we can clip each presentation as a one video and then put it in library, make the training available to new trustees that will join the committee in the future. So as a part of orientation when they join the committee, would that be a good idea?
I think it is.
We can do that.
Thanks, Richard.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so if that's all, am I okay to call for the good of the order? Okay, anybody have anything they want to say? Okay, with that, we will adjourn. Been a great training. Thank you all for participating.
All a great discussion today. Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you. Have a good